Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. I mean, I don't see.
Hello.
Is it recording?
Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's recording now. I mean, it doesn't seem very high.
Okay.
The blips don't seem very high, but I guess just turn it up.
Okay. Well, you can put the headphones on. You can adjust everything.
Cool.
And and then
All right. La 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 la. I can hear myself. That's very nice. Why don't you keep talking a little bit?
Hello.
Ooh, it's that smoky.
I probably won't use that voice, but hello.
You should. I think the entire podcast you should use that. Keep talking a little bit more.
Hello. How are you?
That's nice. Can you hear yourself okay?
Yeah, fairly well.
Okay, good. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conservative Episode 3. I am so grateful to have the wonderful Pollo Del Mar on our podcast today. And I got some butter and some cheese sticks and a Pellegrino. It's all for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm
know you
lactose
said-
intolerant. That ought to make this a really
Was it
fun
really?
experience. Make an amazing experience for you.
Yeah, no, this would be a very uncomfortable. Yeah, this would be a very uncomfortable experience.
This episode of the podcast is filmed in Odorama.
Yeah, exactly.
Recorded in Odorama.
I never have seen any of. In fact, actually, I think I've only seen one full John Waters movie. I respect John Waters and everything he does, but I think the only one I've seen is that one he did in the 2000s with what's his face, Chris Isaac, and Tracy Ullman.
So basically what Peter is talking about is that the Odorama reference is directly towards a John Waters film that came out in 1980 called Polyester. It's my favorite John Waters film. It was filmed in Odorama. It came with an Odorama card where you could scratch and sniff. And the reason it was filmed in Odorama is the lead character, Francine Fishpaw, has an overactive olfactory gland, and so she can smell everything.
Wow. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, she can smell everything. It's pretty interesting.
Right. I respect the shit out of that guy. I really like anybody
Very creative.
who pushes boundaries. I love everything, even though I haven't, watched a lot of his movies.
Yeah, you've only actually referenced the worst John Waters film, a John Waters film that I haven't even seen.
Yeah, it wasn't. Okay. Well, yeah, it wasn't great. It was definitely. It was funny, but it wasn't great. But I respect so much of what the fact that he does what he does in general, and then, his presence in talks and in interviews is so fantastic. I just love, kind of his mind and stuff.
Yeah, so John became successful by being this underground filmmaker, and I think that the film that you had the opportunity to see was after he had gone mainstream, and I think that even he would acknowledge that there was a period of his career where the mainstream popularity of things like any of his movies from the 80s had become super mainstream, right?
Right.
So he had Cry Baby, and
they redid not Shampoo. Damn it, what is it called?
Hairspray.
So
So the success specifically,
what a bad fag hag I am. I don't even know.
The success specifically of Hairspray almost ruined his career. He told me that in an interview.
Wow.
Because
you've interviewed John Waters.
Oh yeah, a couple times, but
God.
So
that's so exciting.
The reason it had almost ruined his career is because he had that tremendous success with the original Hairspray, you guys. The listeners out there, he had an original version of the Hairspray,
right,
which was recreated many years later, obviously, with John Travolta and others in it. But the original version was super successful. It was not a musical.
Right.
And it came at the tail end of all of these tremendously raunchy, very, X-rated, or not rated because they would not give a rating to them, films of the 70s starring Divine, and then Hairspray was super mainstream, so all the people saw it, loved it, and they're like, oh, now I want to see more stuff from him. And then when they looked, they get stuff like Pink Flamingos, where it's full frontal nudity, a lot of really intense sexual experiences, as well as the ending and the outtakes. The most famous outtake of all is Divine actually eating dog shit fresh out of the dog's ass. It's not movie magic, friends.
Did you? I actually watched I have actually seen Hairspray. I was wrong. I saw the original. I didn't see the John Travolta one. I'm sure it's probably not great, but
I mean, it's not bad. It's just a completely different film experience.
Okay, John Waters was involved in it, but not.
Yes, so it was based on the John Waters script. It was not directed by John Waters.
Right.
It's a John Waters production that has been altered because, of course, now it's become a mainstream, very popular Broadway production.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
of course.
Oh, yeah. John Panette was
Harvey
played.
Firestein played
Really?
Edna,
That
the main
would be
character.
great. That would be great to hear.
So,
But did you ever see the Divine documentary?
I'm trying to remember. Like, was it called Divine Trash? That one.
I'm sure there's
a
multiple,
number.
But I
of
watched
them.
one. It was really moving. It was really nice.
So, and of course, Divine, being from San Francisco, Divine had a tremendous impact here because they did a lot of their high-profile stuff here in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So, and
like, you mean Divine and John would come here?
Divine and John spent a lot of time here, and Divine spent a lot of time here specifically. John Waters specifically still comes here to visit on a regular basis. He's very interesting. You can often catch him during his visits taking Muni. He loves to take public transportation.
Yeah, I've heard
and
that.
then people will be like, "Who's this weirdo?" or whatever, and then they find out later. Right. And he is very, very close friends with San Francisco drag personality and icon Peaches Christ. They're very, very close. Right. Which, according to Peaches, was mind blowing because he changed her life growing up.
Right. So, I've known and done work with you, and a little like I've kind of known in peripherally. That's not the right word. But like
peripherally is the right word.
Is it really?
Yeah.
All right, good. Heclina and Peaches and a bunch of the drag community around San Francisco. When did you and I meet? I think it was 2014, maybe.
It was a number of years ago. You were singing in your panties at for the Mr. San Francisco leather competition.
Yeah. I did the first one, and I think that was the year I dropped my pants.
It was.
That was fun. And then through that, you and I think I still have some heels that you let me borrow.
Yeah.
And some platform boots.
Yep.
And if you ever want those back,
I don't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I've only worn them once or twice. It's not like I smelled them up or anything.
Yeah, I don't want them back. I'm actually in the process right now of trying to purge belongings from my house, and if I don't have it, if it's out of sight and out of mind, I don't need it back.
Oh right, I saw you posted on Facebook. You've been doing like a spring cleaning type of purging.
It is beyond that. So I live in a one-bedroom. Peter's actually been to my house. Like, I live in a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of San Francisco, and as my drag career over the years took off, I felt trapped in my own drag in my bedroom. So I turned the bedroom into a drag room. It's like a huge closet.
Right.
And moved my bed into the living room. And the idea was that I'd be able to put the drag aside, that I could live my real life during the week or whenever, whatever days that might be, and then put that aside. And what has happened over the course of well over a decade now of doing drag is that I've accumulated so many costumes, so many wigs. I went through a pile of wigs that legitimately, listeners, was almost as tall as I am. And I'm just under 6 foot tall, so it was quite
You're a tall man.
I went through it, and I had an even taller woman. Yes, tall man, an even taller woman. And
You are an Amazon, yeah.
Glamazon. And
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And I took all these wigs and put them in Ziploc bags. I'm just trying to find some semblance of order in that room because
How much of those wigs would you still currently wear?
well, I was going through them. Almost all the ones I put away, I would be able to restyle and wear again. I mean,
Restyle?
I wouldn't just
what does
pull
that
them
look
out
like?
and like throw them on my head necessarily.
Sure.
Well, after a number of wears, the hair gets frizzy or ugly, and so it has to be washed and steamed, which is a process in itself, which will take away the frizzing, and then you can just restyle it, throw some curlers in it, and fix it up. And of course, I'm really bad at this, listeners. I'm good at makeup, but I'm really bad at styling hair. So if you were to go to my Instagram, you would be like, well, she really likes that sideways swoop with the bang. I'm like, yeah, I sure do, bitch. That's the only hairdo I know. That's the only one I can do for myself. So
You're
sure
amazing at makeup, though. You do live videos. You do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that seems like quite a process. Now, how often when you're doing this, is the pain of having to restyle, or the pain of having to get the makeup off, or the pain of the heels, or the pain of all this shit, is it outweigh the joy? Does it ever outweigh that? Do you ever feel like I need a fucking break?
Oh, I need a break a lot, but the fact is that almost there are very few times when I sit down and I'm like, I really just want to do makeup, or I really want to do this. Most of the time it's overwhelming. I have to sort of cheerlead myself into the mindset to do it. Once I'm in and everything is set, and once I go out into public, I love it. Like once I'm on stage, and when to me on stage means the moment I leave my house,
Yeah.
or in a lot of cases now because I do live feeds and videos and whatever from my home, the moment I'm not in front of any kind of an audience, meaning if it's just me by myself,
Right.
then once I'm in front of people, then I'm good because I
Right.
love people. I love interacting with people. I love the audience participation that comes with it. I love the kind of inspiration that you can give without even trying to people when you're in drag.
Right, and it seems like that's not even, it doesn't even seem like that's a conscious thing, because I kind of have that a little bit, but like, sometimes I have to force myself, okay, be present, be in the moment, give more than you're taking, you know, all that spiritual stuff, but like, often when I'm just on stage, I kind of like, automatically, I'm like, oh, I just want to be here with them, I just want to give them
absolutely.
what they want, you know, that seems like a natural thing for you.
Yeah, I do love that, and the element about drag that I do love the most is the sense of community that it's given me.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time in San Francisco my first number of years here, sort of floundering around. I left an environment when I lived in Cleveland, Ohio, wherein I had grown up with the friends that I was close to, and though we hadn't known each other since we were children, we all met predominantly when we were in college, so I'd known most of them for 8 years since we were teenagers. And when I moved here to San Francisco, I knew 0 people, not one person. So to go from an environment that was intensely intimate with people I had known through my most formative years, I think that those years in college and coming out and embracing my personal identity, those were all so integral to who I am as a person, and they'd experienced it. So to go from knowing people who knew me on that level to knowing no one when I got here, I felt like I was floundering around for a number of years. And then through a series of events, like from hitting rock bottom through like my partying too much to kind of being reborn as Pollo Del Mar, was very instrumental in creating a sense of community for me. And the people that I've connected with over the years, I've been doing this like 13 years now. So the people that I've met have changed my life, and it's really influential to me to have them in my life. And it's great to be able to give that back. But I really thrive on that kind of interaction from the audiences, and I feel
it's a very supportive. Pull the mic a little bit closer.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's a very supportive community too. Like I notice it's always meaning
it
like
can be. It's not always, but it can be.
But I mean, like, so if I go to a show with a bunch of other musicians, mostly, and obviously there's a little bit of a difference in the Berkeley and Oakland. They want to make believe, hey, we're all a community, bro, and you know, here's a crystal. But like mostly, it's
that's like a crystal to wear, not a crystal to smoke or inject. You guys like
right. Well, in LA, I think
in LA, it's totally, like here's some crystal,
right. But in general, we're all kind of like, okay, am I gonna make it? Are people paying attention to my music? Is it my me? And I'm sure it has its own, you know,
drag
things.
100% has that,
right?
Don't fool yourself.
But in the audience, they come to watch that. It seems anyway. I know for me anyway, when I've done drag, everybody's kind of like, yeah, you know, they're ready for you to do something. You know, they're not like, oh, impress me. You know?
I think it depends. I really do believe that it depends on the audience, the location, the venue you're at. I think it can definitely vary. I think that there are some places where people are so just excited to see performance, whatever that might look like, whether it's drag or musicians or whatever. When people come to an environment for performance, I think they can be super supportive. I think that there are definitely places now, because of the advent and influence of things like RuPaul's Drag Race, where every single 12-year-old who's watched an episode on VH1 thinks that they are the end-all be-all of what drag is supposed to be now.
Right.
And I think that because of that, it has changed things a little bit, at least in my experience as a performer. But overall, I think that the queens themselves are a sisterhood, which doesn't always make us nice to each other, but there's an underlying element of support there. And I also recognize that most of the audience is there to watch you have fun and watch you enjoy yourself and enjoy themselves as a result.
Right. Do you know any of the guys over the kind of the stud contingency, like the Glamamore?
I have been doing drag so long that, with the exception of the people who may be very, very new in the scene, who I haven't yet experienced, I've had an opportunity to work with or know almost everyone.
Right.
So, of course, Glamamore, the House of More, I know know all of them, not exceedingly well, but our paths have certainly crossed numerous times. Yeah,
Right.
the stud is not one of my more obvious choices to perform there. I haven't actually performed at the stud, as best I can recall, since Tranny Shack left maybe 10 years ago.
Wow. So
So-
Tranny Shack was from Heclina, right?
Yeah,
How
Heclina's
long
Tranny
did
Shack-
she do that?
Well, Heclina's Tranny Shack ran probably easily over 20 years, and it
Wow.
was at the stud. It was on Tuesday nights at the stud at midnight, and it was a thriving community of people. And I had the opportunity towards the end of that experience. That's when I was starting, and then it moved from the stud to DNA Lounge, where it was a much larger production,
Right.
a completely different kind of animal, a different beast, and a different challenge. And then now, of course, because Heclina owns Oasis, co-owns Oasis, it was, and because of some issues regarding the name Tranny Shack, it was rebranded as Mother, and it's a Saturday night event there.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen. I've also some of the shows are. Glamour does apparently a show called Pillows, which I just
I think it's just single pillow, maybe
Oh, is it
one
really?
pillow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just like one pillow, not multiples, just one.
I love one of my favorite things about. So first, maybe I'll get to that other shit later. But I'm interested more. I might want to dissect. So you didn't do any drag until you got sober.
I had never done it the way people think of it now. Yeah,
Okay.
For me, there was, like most gay men, I dabbled in it a couple times. When the last night that I lived in Cleveland, right before I moved, I was kind of notorious there for throwing these huge house parties, and every house party would have a theme, and they'd be like every 3 months or whatever, and it would be so massive that the gay clubs in Cleveland would be dead that night.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I had because Cleveland has a very different rental rate than San Francisco, especially
Sure.
then. I had this 2-story, 3-bedroom apartment, and with it was just rather huge, and it would be like wall to wall people. And my last night there, our theme was "Moving is Such a Drag."
Right.
And so we had a drag pageant in my living room, and it was very the first runner-up for Miss Gay Ohio put on my makeup, and thank God I'm a better makeup artist now than she was then, because it was not.
There's that supportive community
Yeah, I
thing
mean-
that we don't.
Bless her heart, she was probably absolutely cutting edge at the time, but
Right.
yeah, I look back at those photos and I'm like, woo.
Now, at that point, did you feel like, oh, this is something I want to do?
So actually, yes. I think that I would have probably been much more inclined to pursue drag when I lived in Cleveland, but in the Midwest, especially in the circles that I ran with in Cleveland, the vast majority of the drag performers there identified as women. So they were a lot of transgender women who performed. They were showgirls. That's
Right.
what they did. They were showgirls and prostitutes
Right.
and drug dealers. That's
Right.
And because of the queens that I knew in the Cleveland area, only two, one that I mentioned who had been a first runner-up for Miss Gay Ohio, who did my makeup, she, and then the big name drag queen in Cleveland, her name's Melissa Ross. She was legendary then, and those were the only two that identified as male.
Okay.
And when I say identify as male, in my opinion, it was it was a toss-up for both of them, because they were they were not not to place judgment on them, but I would
Sure.
say that my own personal identity and my sexuality, my gender identity, was pretty much at a variant end of the spectrum from theirs. And
Right.
so I didn't think that it was a possibility. And the other thing that I will say is that in Cleveland, it was a very specific style of drag, and I did not think that I wasn't educated enough about the art of drag and the
Sure.
art of makeup to think that I could fall into that category.
Right.
So it wasn't until I came to San Francisco and I saw things like Tranny Shack, where
Right.
the drag was more punk rock,
Right.
and it was more inspired by Divine or
Right.
this outlandishness, as opposed to gender illusion to look female. I was certain I could do that. I
Right.
was certain that I could be hairy, or that I could look scary, or whatever it is that is
Right.
acceptable here, especially circa 2006.
Right.
And it wasn't until years later, after doing drag for a number of years, I was like, oh, somebody showed me differently, and I realized, well, you can look feminine. You can give female illusion. You could do that if you wanted to.
Did you feel like personally because we don't know each other super well, but I'm kind of a trash bag. Like I like kind of the dirt and the punk and the I like the drag that I did was kind of creepy, fun.
Right.
Did you feel like there was an insecurity about I can't pull off the feminine thing, or I can't be that type of. Is that what it was for you?
Absolutely. And I remember when I first started doing drag, specifically, there was a performer who I won't name, but somebody I admired greatly, very successful in some of the worlds here in San Francisco drag, who said to me specifically, well, you'll never be able to be super pretty. You'll never be able to be super feminine. So I think that you should go outrageous and over the top. And so that's what I did. Like, when you look back at my early drag photos, my eyebrows were literally disappearing into my hairline.
Right.
Everything was very large and outlandish, and also I'll just throw in there, in a humble sake, like, also really poorly done. It was just really poorly done. But the fact was that I think that experience is so true of many things that I've done in my lifetime, where somebody that I respected, trusted, told me something that wasn't true. Right. I accepted it as fact and lived based on that, quote, fact for a number of years until somebody challenged it. And so I can give other examples. Like, when I was growing up, I was always a heavy kid, and my grandmother used to say, well, you just big boned. Everybody's like, in the family's larger, whatever. And I accepted that as fact. And it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s, I was like, wait a minute, that's totally a lie. Like, only the women in my family are fat. And like, and not even all of them, like, all the guys in my family are skinny. I never even tried to not be heavy. Right. I've never tried to do something different. So then I tried something, and it, my version, by the way, listeners, of trying that was like, I should take a copious amounts of diet pills.
Right.
And I lost so much weight. But it wasn't like really beneficial in the long run. But really, when it came to the drag thing, I accepted that as fact, because this was a person who, in a lot of ways, I felt I related to in terms of our physical appearance. I saw his drag, what it looked like, how successful it had been for him, and I just embraced that idea. Versus years later, after having a tremendous amount of success early on in my career, somebody else said to me, well, have you ever tried this? And it was a performer from RuPaul's Drag Race, a friend of mine I was on tour with. Her name's Linacia Sparks. Probably not one of the most successful or best known performers from that show, but one of the most beautiful for sure. And she showed me a different way to do makeup, and I watched her. She did give me a makeover in a hotel bathroom, like at our hotel room, in like 30 minutes. I watched, asked every question, like, what is that product? Why are you doing it? Show me again. She did it so fast, but I absorbed all of it, and from that day on, I've never looked the same as I did the day before. And I adopted that style of makeup, and it actually is what inspired my now love and passion for doing makeup, whether it's creative makeup, because you mentioned like that scary, or like I mentioned it as outlandish. I love to do that too, still.
Yeah,
but it's not.
That's what I've noticed. Like,
it's
you
not
still
my
do the
norm.
Right, that's awesome. Did you feel like I had the similar experience? I had a mentor for a long, long time, about 11 years, and for the last 5 years of that, it kind of became. I still need to do some inventory on it, but it kind of became quite abusive. And but I trusted that idea of like, well, he's a mentor, you know what I mean? It has to be, because but it only in the last year has it become clear that maybe I might not need to necessarily live, but I got so attached to that identity, kind of like the fat thing. Like, I've lost a lot of weight because I thought I was, well, I'm always going to be this fat guy, and I'm always going to be this kind of loser, and I'm always going to be, and it's so funny how I don't know about you, but for me, like, I can take a lot of pain, what I mean? Like, absolutely. A lot of uncomfortability. I will sit and be shit, in this uncomfortable situation for a long fucking time.
But so what I would say about that is too that I think as humans we have within us the ability to embrace and accept and wallow in a discomfort that's familiar, right? Versus challenging ourselves by trying to do something different, which is its own form of discomfort. But it's not familiar. And so it becomes very easy to revert right back to that mindset. So if you're trying something new and it feels uncomfortable and you don't necessarily see immediate results or progress, then you're like, fuck it. I'm going back to what I know. Yeah. And it can keep you really trapped. Yeah. So for me, I find that I try to kind of like dive into those places and things that make me uncomfortable. And that can be anything, whether it is, you know, as simple as makeup, because for example, I'll give you an example. Like, I collect these makeup wipe art pieces where I do my makeup and then I'll take the makeup off on a makeup wipe and I save the makeup wipe.
Nice.
And in fact, I'm getting ready to do a charity art exhibit with 50 of those makeup wipes.
Like the Shroud of Turin.
Very, very similar. So
Nice.
I recognized, I was looking at these makeup wipes, and there was a period of time, like 4 months, which is probably 30 wipes maybe. I looked at it and they were almost all identical, and I thought to myself, okay, you have clearly reverted back to like the tried and true, the only thing that you know.
Right.
And it's because even as somebody who loves makeup, stepping outside that norm, I had that fear of like, well, what if it doesn't turn out? What if I look like shit? What if I'm like, you know, now I have this image of myself. What if I can't even live up to my standard?
Right.
And the reality is, with something that simple, it's just makeup, you know,
Right.
like it's just makeup. And it's not going to kill you. I actually, you know, I mentioned to Peter off air that I was just sitting at home or sitting at a restaurant editing my own podcast. And I had on that podcast, I have Lisa Stansfield, the Been Around the World in I.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So, and we were talking about that fear that artists specifically can encounter. And she said, really, what is the worst that can happen? You're not going to die. You know,
Right.
you're not going to die, and you have to just challenge yourself that way. And that's what I have to remind myself about all things in life. Most of my decisions are not going to kill me.
No.
At best, I'll have a, you know, great outcome. At worst, I'll have a setback that becomes a learning opportunity.
Right.
And when it comes to something like my art, which is my drag, you know, I can probably survive a night of looking hideous or feeling hideous, because even when I feel hideous, people are like, "You look amazing, girl."
Yeah, exactly.
So-
I can't. When I'm performing, I can't tell you how many times I've had, like, especially when I'm doing it. And maybe you can relate to this, and I'm sure you can. But sometimes I'll be performing and I'll be so kind of caught in my head, and I'm like, okay, I'm not getting enough tips, or I'm not getting, people aren't paying attention, or I'm not, this is da. So I start being kind of like I'm taking instead of giving this freely, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I get off stage, even if I'm in that position, I don't believe.
Of course.
When people, oh, you did such a, I'm like, yeah. Even if I say thank you, I really am like, I'm such a piece of shit, or you're a piece of shit, or that didn't go right, or I messed up on that note, or I da. Instead of just being present, being in the moment. So I don't believe it when people tell me, but it's a hard thing, and I think it's natural for artists to kind of judge ourselves that way. But
well, I certainly feel like I think that the audience, I project on the audience my own level of expectation.
Right.
And when I don't live up to my own expectation, being my own worst critic, it's a very bad time for me. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I always tell young performers or people who are considering the idea of, I'm stepping on the stage for the first time, or whatever it is, that if you're not up there enjoying yourself, I can't enjoy it as a viewer, as an audience member. Because I've been in situations where I've been watching people and they are so consumed with this, that, or the other about their own performance that you can read their nerves, and it makes me nervous on their behalf. Versus other times when I've seen somebody who was an absolute tragic mess on stage from any kind of a technical standpoint. Their makeup was a mess, their hair was a mess, everything about them was a mess.
Right.
But they were having the time of their life, and it makes it very enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, I try to remind myself of that. If I'm not on stage having fun, nobody else can have fun. And in terms of doing my, like, anytime I'm emceeing something or doing comedy or whatever, there are numerous times when I'll just crack myself up and I just say to the audience outright, like, sorry, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm up here entertaining myself. Right. I'm fucking hilarious.
Right.
Now
you talked about your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Party Foul Radio with Pollo Del Mar.
Oh, that's nice. Where can people find it?
You can look it up on the Podomatic app. It's podomatic.com/Party Foul Radio. And you can find it on both Twitter and on Facebook. Just look at Party Foul Radio as well. Right. So it's been going on for a couple of years. We've had some incredible guests. We're getting ready to, meaning the royal we. I'm getting ready to relaunch it. I had a podcast co-host for the first couple of years, and our schedules are just not compatible right now. So we've been on this extended hiatus for a significant part of this year, and it's going to begin taking on a different format with probably no co-hosts. That's standard. So I'll be able to do what I want on a schedule that I need to do it.
Yeah.
So just so I can have it out there, because I love it. The more different creative outlets that I have, whether it's makeup or
Right.
Facebook Live or social media or my podcast, because I have multiple. I have 2.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, you name it. I've tried my hand at it. I'm not very good at any of them, but I've done it all, and I'm okay with that. Because
Yeah, you just got to diversify, man.
it's life. I get a certain number of days to live and get new experiences,
Yep.
and so I'm just going to do it.
Right.
I could not use a bigger example of that than the fact that I cannot sing a note, not 1, 0. Horrible, and I've yet released 5 recordings, like
Really? Nice.
dance recordings. Yeah, so it doesn't matter to me, and I try not to pay attention to what people might think. It's not for the people who don't like it; it's for the one person who does like it. So,
Right.
and
And-
myself,
and exactly.
and myself,
Yeah.
because of the fact that no matter what, it's a footnote in my life to say I love music, and I wrote this music, and I produced this music, and I put it out there, and I did it. And if you don't like it, then listen to something else.
Well, I think there's incredible power in giving a fuck. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think there's if I give a shit, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this stupid shit that, whatever, is that I love listening to podcasts and I love listening to radio shows, and I wanted to kind of be a part of that. And I wanted to, sometimes I'm listening to a podcast and I'm yelling at them, or I'm like, yeah, that's great. And I want to use that, or it's really inspiring to me. And so I wanted to have conversations with people that I wanted to do that for others,
Well, podcasts are just, I mean, for somebody like myself, podcasts are so amazing because in addition to all the things that we've talked about that I have done as a drag performer, right now I took on this new professional position that has me on trains a lot. Like, I'm commuting all over.
Right.
So I have 2 hours sometimes each way. And so I'm like, okay, let me just listen to a podcast or whatever to just kill time and be entertained and amused. So I appreciate podcasts as an art form.
Right. That's awesome. So, obviously, okay, so you got sober.
I did.
Where in the lineage, where in the timeline did you think oh, you know what? What about drag again?
So actually, I had never when I got sober. I got sober in April of 2004, and that's because I couldn't drink like a gentleman and smoke meth like a lady. I just
Right.
I could not manage to figure out how.
Apparently,
it was.
some people can.
I
But
just could not figure out how normal people smoke meth on the weekends and still
Right.
make it to to the work on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right, exactly.
Any day during the week. I couldn't make myself get there. So anyway, I got sober in 2004, and it was about a year and a half later that I was at a fundraising event that built around people who do not traditionally or normally do drag, doing drag. And in that, this individual that I had known at that time was getting ready to perform at one of these events, and he told me I used to be this amazing performer in Sacramento, and I was super popular, and I was very successful, and now I get to go back and do this again, without drugs and without alcohol. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's so amazing. I was really supportive and really happy for him. And he talked about it incessantly.
This was a guy you were with, or
no? This was just a person that
okay.
I knew,
friend
from being sober, and he was talking about this incessantly. And he got this fucking wig, and he sat at this sober coffee shop and brushed this wig every day. It was like Marsha Brady on meth, just brushing 100 strokes is good.
Right.
I thought to myself, by the time this show actually gets here, that wig's not going to have a single fucking hair left in
Right.
it. But the day he finally comes, he gets up there to perform, and I'm not kidding that to this day, I've seen a lot of drag. He was among the absolute worst I've ever seen.
Oh.
And I was sitting in the audience, and I thought to myself, this bitch has been talking about this for months. Absolutely months, telling me all this, how amazing he is, whatever. And this is dreadful. And then
That's his first time. I mean,
he said it was maybe his first time sober, but he told me he was so amazing or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, let this be a note to you. You guys, if you are not 100% certain that you're going to be whatever, that's fine. You don't have to be amazing your first time out, but please don't tell people for months in advance how incredible you are and then underwhelm, because that is the worst. If anything, go the exact opposite. Be like, oh, I'm really horrible, but I'm going to have a good time. And then when you see that person, you're like, you're right, he is horrible, but he appears to be having a good time, so celebrate. Right. So anyway, in that moment of resentment about this person basically like blowing hot air at my skirt for months, this like internalized voice said, you know what, at least he's got the balls to get up there and do it. Right. You don't have that. So either do better or shut the fuck up. Right. And that's why the way my inside voice talks to me, you guys. So I thought to myself, well, I will do better. And so 6 months later rolls around and they have a similar show in the spring, and that's when I did it. I did drag for the first time in spring of 2006 as Pollo Del Mar. Of course, as I mentioned, like every gay guy, I'd dressed up for Halloween or whatever. But it was in April 27, 2006 that Pollo Del Mar was officially born. And that day was quite a whirlwind, because I went out from that event to a drag show in the Castro. And as it turned out, I was pulled out of the crowd, pulled onto stage, and asked to perform at an upcoming show at that location. And from that day on, I've been performing almost every single weekend. That was, whatever, almost 13 years ago. Right. So that's how it came about, but it was definitely born of sobriety. I've never done any of the things that people know me for over these past many years, drunk or high. Yeah. He keeps telling me to put the mic really close to my mouth. And I figured
you would be better at that.
I know, exactly. That's the problem, Peter, because when I see something like
flesh-colored.
hard and black in front of me like this, it's very difficult for not to let it tickle my tonsils.
You don't want to salivate all over it.
Salivate over it? I don't want to swallow it.
I was just, damn it, I was going to say something, then we got distracted with dicks.
That's the story of my life. I was going to say something, and then I got distracted with dicks. That is basically, that's going to be on my tombstone. Right. Was going to say something, then got distracted with dicks.
I don't think my laughing style, I clap too much. This is not good for podcasts, man. I'm just not, Anyway, where did the name come in?
Pollo Del Mar?
It's a fucking great name.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's phenomenal as well. Right. And I've always been glad I'm not like a Felicia or something. Right. So, or, Angelica.
Yeah, there's so many. That's so.
Well, again, anyway, when I came from Cleveland, as I said, the most successful and most popular drag performer in Cleveland's name is Melissa Ross.
Right.
And
there's nothing about that stands out.
It's the lady next door's name, right? Like, oh, is that your neighbor? Yes, Melissa Ross. Like,
that's like the pageant type of drag. That's like, I would even say I'm very feminine, or
Melissa Ross isn't even a pageant name. That's legitimately, she was inspired, I think, because she was fascinated with Diana Ross, so she took Diana Ross's name.
I see.
I don't know where the hell Melissa came in. I don't know her story. I will tell you that I remember, this was years and years before I ever did drag myself, but I saw her performing one night at this club called The Cage in Cleveland, and afterwards I was like, I really and she always performs Celine Dion. I was like, I really love the way you look tonight, Melissa.
Celine Dion.
Well, this is the mid-90s, right? So she's up there like,
was there humor in it though?
Hell no. She's
really?
Up there doing ballads like, Jesus. In a Sears Roebuck's beaded gown, and I just remember saying to her, like, I just loved your performance tonight, Melissa. You're so pretty. You remind me of my Aunt Nancy. Friends listening, telling somebody they remind you of your mom's sister is not a fucking drag compliment. Oh my God, you remind me of my Aunt Nancy. Right. I mean, clearly on the days that she's not working in the assembly line at General Motors and when she's sort of done her hair, maybe.
Right.
You remind me of my Aunt Nancy if she like washed up to go to dinner or the opera. No, she doesn't go to the opera. If she was going to Olive Garden, a nice night out.
Right. That type of drag. That type of, and I'm sure it's probably different now, right? I mean, since it's become kind of more mainstream in Ohio anyway, is it different than it is?
No, because Ohio's Midwest, and the Midwest leans towards pageant drag, and at least now we've gotten to see pageant drag can be incredible.
Sure.
Pageant drag can be the ultimate in glamour.
Absolutely.
In Cleveland, it just wasn't. But in terms of my specific name, it is actually a boring story. I was on a date years before I was doing drag. I saw a menu item that was called Delicia del Mar, like delicacies of the sea.
Nice.
And I was like, if I ever did drag, I would want that to be my name because I thought it was really funny.
Right.
And then when it fast forward a couple years when I was actually getting ready to do drag, I did not want to do. By the way, that really boring drag queen who inspired me to actually do it was like, "We'll be drag sisters. You'll be Delicia Del Mar, and I'll be Vanessa Del Mar." Oh, I shouldn't have told her name because whatever, don't care. So she's like, "I'll be Vanessa Del Mar," and I was like, thinking to myself, "Great, just what I need, like a busted fucking sister."
Oh
like,
shit!
And I'm thinking to myself, "We'll just
Such
need
a supportive community.
we just need one more, and then I can be the Cinderella of this bunch.
Yeah,
I'll be
of
the
course,
Beyonce,
of course.
yeah. With like not even a Kelly and a Michelle, like with a Latavia and a Farrah. Like
I don't even know the reference.
That's a Destiny's Child reference, and Latavia and Farrah were like the super busted ones that got kicked out right away.
Wow.
Anyway, so when the day came closer to do drag, one of the things that I thought about is there was a person who had done drag at this particular event a couple years before, and his name was Betty, like his drag name was Betty, and for years, even though he did drag like once a year, people would be like, "Hi, Betty," and I never wanted to be on the street and have people call me by something that immediately sounds like a woman's name,
Right.
and to me, it just wasn't, I didn't want to walk down the street, "Hello, Angelica Marie Devereaux," whatever.
Right.
So when I loved the idea of the Del Mar, I did love that. And so my first name is Paul, and I thought, what starts with a P and goes with this? And then the idea of Pollo Del Mar, and I admittedly love Jessica Simpson. I don't care what any of you say. I don't care what any of you say. She's amazing, and she's also talented, and she's beautiful, and she's also a billionaire. So stick that in your fucking pipe and smoke it. So
fucking Cowboys fans.
So I decided to go with Pollo Del Mar, and because it does not sound like a woman's name at all.
Right.
And the great thing that a luxury really of being a San Francisco drag performer is that, puns across the country in drag or plays on words have been always embraced. And secondly, you don't have to sound like a woman's name at all, here in San Francisco to be very popular.
What's that? There's that guy's name. He literally, is it Peter? He literally just has a male name. God damn it. He did, he almost reminds me of the Peter Pan, shit. I can't think of his damn name.
Let's see. So the first, local?
Yeah.
So the first one that comes to mind who is Valentine, whose name is just Valentine. His real name is Jeff Valentine, but he goes by Valentine.
Right.
The most, probably iconic of this kind of thing would be Bob the drag queen who won RuPaul's Drag Race.
Right.
Bob the drag queen.
I do love fucking Purse First, dude. That's a great track.
there's a lot of things, and now I don't think, iconically through the years we've had people like Charles Bush, who just went by Charles Bush, Matthew Martin locally. Matthew Martin just goes by Matthew Martin,
right.
and the reason that a lot of early drag performers and the kind of who inspired the era that Matthew Martin, who is a dear friend of mine who I did Golden Girls with locally for years and years, for over a decade. The reason,
great show, by the way.
reason that those individuals, I don't think, felt the need to have a drag name is because they were not they did not consider themselves drag queens. They considered themselves actors who became famous for playing a particular role, which happened to be female, and therefore they did not need to specifically have something that was set aside for that personality or persona. There's a lot of Derek Barry is another Drag Race performer who goes by his first, his real name, Derek Barry. It does not need to be a woman. Charlie Hyde from RuPaul's Drag Race. These are names of people as they stand and they play a character.
Right.
And I've thought through the years many times, would it be better for me if I had gone that route? But in some ways, maybe yes, because then there wouldn't be this split dual identity. But at the same time, for me, the identity of Pollo Del Mar is very separate. And when I think about that name for myself, it conjures a character, which conjures an identity. And therefore, when I, think about certain things, I can think about it in the context of and I will sometimes. Maybe it's just a mental illness, but I refer to that in a third. Oh, that's very Pollo, like that,
right?
And my friends do the same thing. That's very Pollo. They'll say that to me because they have, knowing me, recognize the difference between the two personas.
Okay.
And there's a very specific idea that goes along with that name.
What's Pollo like? Is she more like trashy or more?
So the inspiration for what Pollo's identity is built on Anna Nicole Smith, and
Really? That's great.
Absolutely.
Now that, because I've seen you perform drag many times, but I'm like, that makes sense.
The whole general look of what I was, because it took me years to branch out and to do other things, because that for me was the evolution of understanding of that character. So as a performer, I got to understand who Pollo Del Mar is and what she is and what she isn't. And one of the things that I mean by what she isn't is that I'm not married to always having to look the exact same way,
right.
Because if I said to you and the listeners, like, she's based on Anna Nicole Smith, that means that anything that does
right.
not look like an Anna Nicole
right.
Smith would be
right.
erroneous. Well, I love doing creative makeup, for example, and I'm just as much Pollo Del Mar if I've got a mural painted on my face as
right.
I am if I have done glamour makeup where I look
right.
feminine.
Right.
But the idea early on was of this Anna Nicole Smith character, because I really related to that idea of having grown up poor, I grew up 8 years in Texas as well, so like Anna Nicole Smith is from Texas. But the idea behind it was this personality that is like super beautiful, that defies the obvious expectations. She defied the first expectation by being not a size 8.
Right.
She defied other expectations because she married somebody who was incredibly old. Whatever. Right. So for me, the idea behind it was that Pollo Del Mar is very, very beautiful. But at the same time, a little bit of a free spirit, a little on the trashy side, a little bit.
Yeah, she doesn't give a fuck. She's doing her one. You can say anything about Anna. She did what she wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's sad the way it ended up, but
sure,
it's true. And I think that the other thing about it also for a long time really helped me to define my ideas of what would Pollo Del Mar do in this situation. Because I would think to myself like, okay, they told me that I have to wear something that's like red carpet. Well, that's a pretty broad spectrum, because then I was like, what would Anna Nicole Smith wear on a red carpet? And clearly, like, she would probably be getting panned by every critic for what she chose, but she was still on the fucking red carpet, and that's the same with me. And like, I don't consider myself a fashionista. I'm not fashion forward. I'm my own thing. And
but also Anna, besides the trashiness, she also had her own version and strong kind of feminine nature as well. So that does go to what you were talking about earlier regarding thinking about, can I fit in this kind of more glamorous, drag versus more of a trashy drag.
Peter, we've had so much to drink. You're drinking a gallon. Can we take a piss break? Sorry, listeners. You won't even know it, but we're totally going to piss.
We're going to fucking urinate. It's going to be amazing. All right, where's my shit? Oh, here it is. So all right, tell us, ladies and gentlemen, Pollo Del Mar found Pop-Tarts in the bathroom.
One of them was half eaten, but I'm still eating. It's delicious.
This is so, I'm so happy to have you.
They were just sitting next to the sink, and I was like, wonder what that is.
What flavor are they?
I don't even know, but they're delicious.
Yeah, it looks.
Want some?
No, thank you very much. They look like
He's watching his figure.
I am watching.
They're not strawberry.
Ooh, blueberry.
Not a berry.
Wow.
I don't know what it is. Indiscernible flavor, but it's pretty delicious.
Delicious is Asian for delicious. Did you know that?
Delicious is what I say all the time.
I wanted to ask you. What does wrestling mean to you? Because I've seen you do a lot of wrestling stuff. Did you grow up watching it in Ohio?
I did, actually. I grew up watching it in every state I've lived in. I've lived in 4, so... Sorry, I'm full of Pop-Tart right now.
Do it.
So, yeah, as a kid, like, my family was looking for something that my grandfather and my father could relate to me on a level with. And we tried everything. They put me in karate lessons. I actually have, like, a little orange belt in karate.
Was it because of the gay thing?
Like, they didn't have... I don't think they had a word for it necessarily back then. But, yeah, it was because of the gay thing. The gay thing. They did not know how to relate to me. My dad and grandfather were very blue collar. I don't even think, actually, they were not even blue collar. Like, I don't think that they had collars. Like, they were like, I don't know, they were like greasy white t-shirt maybe.
Right.
But it was about the inability for them to connect with me on any level of discernible or like masculinity, you know.
Sure.
And so my grandfather introduced me to pro wrestling when I was 8, and I was obsessed with it from the very beginning. You know, it's a showmanship, and it's a storytelling, and it's, you know, people always, I think, when they hear somebody who might be gay say that they like pro wrestling, their go-to is immediately, oh, the guys are hot or this and that.
Right.
And that's true. They
It's a
are,
piece of it,
but
right.
but that has never been my primary focus of interest in it. It's just been about the storytelling and the showmanship. So a couple of years ago here in the Bay Area, I've been a journalist for 25 years. So as part of that, in the last 10, I started interviewing professional wrestlers because my specialty is celebrity journalism. And so I started to incorporate professional wrestlers and my love for that into what I was writing. And for a number of years, I was writing for the HuffPost.
Really?
And I was the only person to consistently cover professional wrestling for the HuffPost. And I was the only openly gay one, and certainly the only drag personality, because I always write as Pollo Del Mar.
Interesting.
And as a result of that, a couple of years ago, I contacted a local organization because they were bringing in a former WWF, WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment talent, and I wanted to interview him in advance of his trip to the Bay Area. And I did that, and they were so impressed by my writing and my knowledge of professional wrestling, they invited me to start participating just in a very limited way. And now it has advanced because I am now co-producing regular professional wrestling shows at El Toro nightclub here in San Francisco. It's at 2470 San Bruno Avenue. And professional wrestling comes there next on September 6th, which is a Thursday night.
Awesome.
And we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary at that location. And it is finally it's about to explode, I think, because our last show, which was in July, was almost completely sold out. It was standing room only, basically.
That's awesome.
And as a result of that, like, I also am now producing the events, not just in terms of promoting them, but I'm also helping to script them. I'm developing all the characters that we have there.
Right.
And I play a central role in the production as well.
Have you ever run across drag queens who poo-poo it or like look down on it because it's so trashy or it's so like campy or anything like that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that when you talk about professional wrestling, most people's response, at least outwardly, is, oh, I used to watch wrestling when I was a child. Like, I used to watch WWF. I used to, and depending on their age, it's like either I was a fan when Hulk Hogan was the champion in the 80s.
Undertaker for me.
Or The Undertaker's another one. The Rock, Stone Cold
Right.
Steve Austin. Those are all people. And then as the people get younger and younger, you'll find that they had a childhood fascination with it, and then it sort of at some point in time became either not cool to them or something that they just didn't want to follow because they were a casual fan versus a real fan. And that's perfectly fine. But
Sure.
most of the time, I think that in the drag community, other drag performers, I think, find it kind of fascinating because we also get to see the sort of parallels in a bizarre, twisted way between what's happening in the professional wrestling world and the kind of stuff that we do in a drag world. Because really, most of the professional wrestlers have this outlandish personality, outrageousness, level of showmanship that is not very different than what I do.
There's a lot of shit talk too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really taking the kind of displays that I saw on my television from showmen like Ric Flair in the 80s and other people, and just twisting it by playing a different gender. You know what I mean? Like that's really what it comes down to. And when people locally ask me what it's like to be a drag performer who is producing and participating in a local professional wrestling show and how I'm accepted by the audiences, I do think that there's an element for some of a homophobic undertone or whatever, but in the world of professional wrestling, whatever is presented in the ring or in that context is taken just as what it is. And I don't think that my getting up there and portraying a female character, because we don't acknowledge that my character is a drag queen per se.
Right.
I'm presented as Pollo Del Mar. I'm a woman.
Right.
It's and
Anna
so,
Nicole is up there ready
exactly.
to beat some
It's
ass.
it's in the same context. Like, we have one of the other most popular characters in our organization is a character called Rock Lobster.
Nice.
And he's a lobster. And so, like, if people can get behind the lobster, the crazy crustacean, being in the ring, then, you know, that is no more or less absurd than
It's not it's not a suspension of disbelief thing. It's more of like, I appreciate this. story being told, whatever it is, you know.
I do think it's a willing suspension of disbelief in a lot of ways because what we see in the world of professional wrestling is that whatever story you're being told, you accept it as fact. You know, you mention, for example, that your childhood favorite or what kind of captivated you as an audience member when you were growing up was The Undertaker.
Right.
Well, depending on which era of The Undertaker you were to look at, and as both an extremely knowledgeable fan and as somebody who's studied this stuff, you know, like from a journalistic perspective, like that character and persona took on multiple different incarnations, but the earliest one was that he was presented as if he was dead. He was like a zombie, a corpse, or whatever, the dead man.
Right.
And as a result of that, he was impervious to pain. He was like impenetrable. His like you know, undefeatable. And so that was just the way it was presented. It was accepted as fact, and the audiences believed it. You know,
I've never thought about it, but I guess it was more like I see him now that I think about it. It's like there's this person, he's not even a fucking wrestler. That's how I thought about it. Like thinking back on it now, I'm like he was superhuman. Like he wasn't a human being, and that's so like that unstoppability is so attractive, I guess, you know. Right.
Well, you know, he also came at the tail end of an era of professional wrestling, specifically in the then World Wrestling Federation, which is now WWE, the largest federation, largest professional wrestling organization in the entire world. But he came at the end of this era where they loved to present caricatures. Right. So, like, there was wrestlers who were presented as trash men who apparently moonlighted every single day as a professional wrestler. There were people who were like preachers or pastors who were professional wrestlers. There was the Undertaker, you know, he was dead. So there was a lot of characters and caricatures then. So I find in a lot of ways that that's exactly what I am. And I feel that my persona in the world of wrestling is built with influence from some of the greatest names, female names, to have ever come along in professional wrestling. And they've all influenced me. So I'm really excited to be able to not only represent that and live out my own dream, but I think that being able to do so in that environment, we're seeing a huge influx of LGBTQ people coming to our shows. Last time our show, as I mentioned, was almost entirely sold out here in San Francisco. And there was an entire section, about 35 people in one entire corner of the facility that were all members of the gay community, queer community, because it gave them permission to not just come and appreciate the show like they might at any other show, but it I gave them personal permission to come and be who they are because I'm up there being myself. Right. So it's very interesting to watch, for example, some things that would not be acceptable in other venues, like a group of 30 guys catcalling like the wrestlers, you know, and like, you know, because that would not be considered probably cool in a lot of other promotions or other places. But I'm like, do it, you know, like tell him he's got a nice ass, whatever, you know, ask him to smack your ass. I don't care. Right.
Do you, so you said something, you said, being yourself. Do you feel like Pollo Del Mar is a piece of you, or do you feel like it's
absolutely?
Okay. I mean, I know that's a fucking hack question, but you know,
I don't think it is because I remember years ago, when I first got sober and I went back into my journalism career because I'd stepped aside. You cannot believe how remarkably difficult it is to formulate clear sentences when you are doing meth. It's very, very difficult.
You can take apart an engine, though.
I mean, yeah, you can rewire like an entire home from pieces of broken computers that you've discovered on the street at 4:00 in the morning. But the fact was that meth thing really screwed up my writing career. So when I got sober and I went back towards it and back into specifically celebrity journalism, one of the first people I did an interview with back then was RuPaul. And when I asked her a very similar question, like, how do you feel the public persona of RuPaul that we see correlates to the person that you know yourself to be? Right. And her answer has been something that I basically co-opted because I realize how accurate it is. And what she said then is that the public persona that people identify as RuPaul is taking the person that she knows herself to be and turning the volume up on every department, you know, like to full blast. And that's
son of a bitch. That's exactly, God damn it.
And that's really how I feel about who I am as Pollo Del Mar, because I think that But it's not an across the board turning up of the volume, for
Right.
example, because there are some elements of
Oh,
the
yeah.
public persona that are already, they exist in my daily life, and they're
Sure.
they're already like a 9, and so I
Right.
maybe turn them up to 10.
Right.
And then there are other elements of that persona that are maybe of my own daily persona and personality, maybe a 1. So I have to really, really crank the volume on those
Mm-hmm.
because that's less innate in me. They're there, but I have to turn the volume up much higher. And as a result, what I've discovered is that the art of leaving my home as Pollo Del Mar and doing what I need to do at the level that I feel the need to do it can be very exhausting. It can be very draining. And
Sure.
I equate it to when people ask, I remember somebody was like, how is it that you're so tired all the time? You're a drag queen and you only work like 2 hours. Your show takes 2 hours. And I get what they're saying, because it's not like the same as working
Right.
an 8-hour grind and doing all the things that I do.
Sure.
I'm doing now. But what I explained to them is that if you imagine my personality being like your iPhone, and you turn the brightness on your screen all the way up, and you turn on 15 of your favorite apps all at once, the battery is going to go dead really, really fast. And when the battery on your phone goes dead, it takes a long time to charge it back to full.
Right.
You know, the 100%. And that's how I feel about my personality and my level of energy, because when I do everything that is required of me by myself, like that I require of myself to be what I think the public needs me to be when I'm in drag, it's draining and it's exhausting. Right. And often I'll have to retreat into myself to like, okay, I'm going completely off the grid for, I came back from a weekend trip to Boise recently, and it was 3 days of drag, and I was there and I had a phenomenal time. I had like the best time, the nicest people.
In Boise.
It was incredible. But when I came home, I was so exhausted that, I took 2 days off, and then I had to start working, and then I would still just come home from work and hibernate.
Right.
And it's because I recognized that, I'm not an actual battery that gets to 0 and turn off. I'm a person who can probably go below what I consider to be 0.
Right.
And it takes me longer. And it took me probably a good week to kind of bounce back from that. So, I think that in terms of the distinction between my personality and what people see, it's very clear. Like there are times when, for example, I can walk into a room without being in drag at all, and depending on who the people are in that environment,
Right.
what that environment itself triggers in me, and the way the people in the room respond to me, that part of my personality automatically turns on. It goes on to autopilot,
Right.
and sometimes it exhausts me, and other times it pisses me off because I'll tell people like, I don't want to have to be that today, so let's just not go there.
Right. Do you feel like you have to? Have there been relationships you've been in where they expect you to be more? You're already rolling your eyes.
God,
You
yeah.
already.
I had this guy that I went out with a couple times, and
They want you to be on the whole fucking time.
I told him, like, I explained to him this was another sober person, so I thought he would be a little bit more conscientious of the struggle I have for this balance in my life, and explained to him really early on, like, I feel like what people see isn't what I get. Like, I can give them all the time, and I feel like I'm always afraid of disappointing somebody. And then he was like, "Oh, I just whatever. Like, let's go out." So we went out a few times, and then ultimately he wanted to stop seeing me, and he said, "I think I'm just more attracted to your persona as Pollo. Like, I like that better." And I get it, because she's fucking hilarious. I'm hilarious. I'm fun all the time, whatever. But my job, especially in a dating relationship, is not to do a fucking song and dance every time I see you.
No.
And it's exhausting. And, I get it that people don't understand, especially when we have a tendency to envy the things in others that we don't see in ourselves. So if somebody finds like that kind of instantly outgoing nature, or that kind of wit and humor to be really appealing, I can get that. I understand that. But at the same time, it's not necessarily 100% doable at all times, because as I just told you guys, it's exhausting. So, it's the same thing as when you hear comedians talk about how difficult it is when they meet people, because they always think everything should be a one-liner or a witty zinger.
Right.
And the reality is that I can do that. I can absolutely do that.
Sure.
But you're never going to... You might feel great about that interaction. You might leave it feeling like, oh my God, Pollo Del Mar is the funniest person. Like I bumped into her at
right.
the grocery store, and she just had me howling.
Right.
And that's fine because it does great to endear me to you.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm in a situation where I'm constantly performing, what I can tell people is that it does not allow me to have the opportunity to actually connect with people.
Right.
Because it's very superficial.
Right.
Like, you know, we recognize if you watch the Golden Girls, the whole thing is witty zingers and whatever. But if their relationship was only those like witty one-liners, those women would not love each other the way they do.
No.
Like, you know, because it's like, how much can you really love somebody or feel connected to somebody who every time you say something is giving you like a bitchy remark or whatever? And I mean, I actually experienced that with some of my closest friends. Like we have a group text thread, and it's a lot of bitchy one-liners and reading people and like shit talking. And I wanted to send something. I was experiencing a bad day the other day, and I wanted to like reach out, but I knew inherently that somebody was going to say something really horrible or cunty, and I wasn't feeling it. And so eventually I just got to that breaking point where I did. And of course, needless to say, first thing back, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? I said, fine, you know what? You just taught me a lesson. You guys are some of my closest friends, but clearly this situation, this established form of communication is not appropriate for what I needed. And like, let's just keep it light and all, whatever. It's very bitchy. And I'm sure my friend is like, oh God, I didn't mean to do that. But what's done is done, bitch.
I feel like so I thought for a long time too that, you know, and again, it goes back to that idea of identity, that I am this, you know, especially when I'm insecure and I'm not feeling, you know, when I'm, you know, in my blah, blah, blah. But I really do feel like who I am on stage is more myself, that kind of more confidence or that quickness or that, and it does come naturally when I'm in the zone. It does come naturally. I'm not fighting. I'm not forcing it. It just is like, this is who I am, and I'm outgoing and I'm blah, 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 blah. But I have been in relationships where, and I put it on myself. I don't think the women like put it on me, like I have to be entertaining. But I have this idea in my head that, okay, I earned this approval or acceptance by being this over the top, confident, you know, kind of snarky, funny asshole. And so now I have to be that over the top, snarky, funny asshole, and it is goddamn exhausting. You know what I mean? It is very much like, I don't want to be, you know, goddamn, you know, not that I want to be, you know, submissive, but like, I don't want to be like Mr. like big fucking swinging cock every goddamn 5 seconds. You know what I mean? I want to just watch a fucking
if you're
movie.
a listener out there and you are Mr. Big fucking swinging cock every 5 minutes, I am single and available. I will do a song and dance routine for you as long as you maintain your big fucking swinging cock. Thank you. Side note. Sorry about that.
No, I appreciate it. But you understand what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely, I understand it because
it's a big piece of me, but it's not fucking 24 goddamn hours a day.
Right. And the thing about it is that in my instance, like there's so many layers to this, but in my situation, I have a really large personality in or out of drag. My personality is very large. It's a very dominant personality. And it's also, there's other elements of my personality that are very prominent as well. Like I have a nurturing parental side. So a lot of people, for me in the world of dating, like I instantly get friend zoned because I'm like everybody's mother. And especially for people who've been part of the queer community for the last 13 years, they've seen me in the spotlight. I've created and cultivated a character that they recognize and relate to.
Sure.
And that does have a maternal element to it, you know, like because I'm older, I'm like, and in the queer community, like drag queens are mother, like, you know, like RuPaul says, call me mother, like, you know, same thing with all of us on our own level. So I get friend zoned for that. And then when it comes to finding a relationship balance, I need to be in a situation where I don't immediately go into that mothering quality or mentoring place of mine, because that creates an imbalance. And secondly, I need somebody who can allow me to be myself. And most of the time, one of the most successful relationships I had in recent memory was strictly companionship, because we basically would just hang out we were definitely dating, but he was so withdrawn, he's so introverted that he'd be like just present and then I would just do whatever. But it was an imbalance in terms of it satisfied me in terms of like the companionship, but it was an imbalance because I did not feel like I had a partner in crime. Like I felt like I had a child who was like very obedient, and then we stopped seeing each other after he called me Pollo during sex one time, and it was over. I was mortified.
I was actually thinking, just as a side note.
By the way, I've never had sex in drag.
Okay.
I never have interest in having sex
is
in
that
drag.
the hat? Is that a hat question too?
No, it's not, because I know certain queens out there who only have sex in drag.
Really?
They absolutely do, and you know, and I'm it's not my place to tell Heclena's business, but it's true. I mean, but I do not do that. I do not have sex in drag, and I never have, and I have no interest in that.
Right.
And a huge part of that is because of, you know, the kind of work I've done to gain acceptance around myself as a sober person. Like, you know, because I want to have an authentic interaction with somebody, even if it's strictly sexual. Sure. I want to feel that person is interested in being with me, you know, and present with me. And I've had, sadly, some of the hottest guys who've come on to me in the last 13 years have wanted to have sex with an illusion, and I cannot do it. First of all, like, I like my makeup. I don't want it to get fucked up by having sex or whatever. Sure. You know, like, that's just not interesting to me at all. Secondly, I don't want to have sex with somebody who isn't interested in me. They're literally only interested in the fetish of the drag or the illusion of the drag, and not at all remotely interested.
Also, there seems to be a whole nother. I mean, that seems like if a guy is super. I mean, and there are kind of tranny chasers, you know, where guys like are more interested in transsexuals, but at the same time, that doesn't even seem like it would be more prevalent in the gay community, because most of the dudes that I talk to, gay guys, they want a guy. You know what I mean? Like, they want to fuck a guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I mean, I definitely have no qualms with, like, I think that it begins to tiptoe into ranges of things like the mask for mask thing, where it's, like, shaming people for being more feminine or more effeminate or whatever.
Right.
And I don't have any of those particular hang-ups. I do find that I'm more attracted to guys who are slightly more masculine, slightly, and not always. I also like men who look really pretty, but as pretty men, not as women.
Right.
But when it comes time that people want to have sex with the illusion, the people who tend to be attracted to transgender women or drag performers, and if you're attracted to transgender women, they consider themselves straight because they're attracted to a woman who's transgender.
Right.
But for me, I'm like, I don't just randomly go around having sex with people to begin with. And when I do have sex with people, it's usually with the possibility in mind of developing some kind of ongoing relationship. And I'm sorry, I haven't met the big swinging dick enough yet that's going to make me put on fucking 2 hours worth of makeup to go to Olive Garden with you. Like, because
this is the second time you've mentioned Olive Garden. I think you really like that place.
I was supposed to have a date earlier this week and go to Olive Garden, and the guy totally blew me off.
Is there an Olive Garden in the city?
It's Stonestown Mall. Not only did I not get my fucking date, but I also did not get my Olive Garden. And
fucking unlimited breadsticks, goddammit.
I want to fucking beat him with an unlimited breadstick. Fuck you.
What a douche.
He was, and it's like, it's my fault because, like, I have too high of standards. This guy happened to be
obviously Olive Garden. You do have very high standards.
He's a Mexican soap opera star, and he was like visiting town, and I was like, we went out once, and then we were supposed to go to Olive Garden because he really likes Olive Garden. And then, like, he totally fucking blew me off. Fuck you. I hope your show's canceled. I hope that motherfucking show gets canceled.
Puta ass bitch. That's fucking insane.
So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's so you said the tranny word, the T word. What's reading? Can you describe reading? What's reading?
The idea of reading?
Yes, sir.
So, you know, reading is a display of wit that basically where you're finding a creative and witty way of stating things to people which usually are based in truth. Like, you know, you tell somebody their truth, that you're spilling the tea, you're telling the truth.
Sure.
And reading is a form of, like, basically turning the mirror on somebody else and in a creative, fun, witty, bitchy way.
Right.
You know, telling them, like, you're it's like this equivalent. It means sort of like, you know, like you're reading their cards, like you're just you're telling them their truth.
Does it have does it more often, so like with me and my friends, or like especially like the more East Coast people, it's more prevalent in straight community anyway, where dudes will just like, yeah, nice fucking shirt, like that type, but that type of stuff doesn't have doesn't. I know. I'm not saying it's the same.
Meanwhile,
I'm not
sitting
equating.
here completely frowning, being like, "Whoa, that was the saddest straight guy read I've ever."
Listen, I'm
Look at your
just
hat.
I'm throwing out a word. So, but that type of
Nice shirt.
reading doesn't have malice underneath it.
So
There's more of a friendship connection, and then you shit on somebody for something that they're insecure about, or and it's funny.
Reading can be very playful. It's like it's a form of, it can be a form of like mental back and forth, like a mental volleying. But when you want, like, when it comes to reading, my friends and I believe in the volleyball reference very quickly, because my friends will be like volley, and then they throw it to me for the spike.
Right.
It's like,
You're like the attack dog.
they're like, we'll let this go back and forth, and then send it to Pollo, because Pollo's going to go for the spike.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be malicious, and in fact, it shouldn't be malicious.
Sure.
But there are times when I think that the ability to do that, especially for gay people, comes from a place of self-defense, because for speaking purely from my own experience, like physically growing up, I was bullied and like picked on and like beat up a lot.
Sure.
And I moved quite often, so there was always a new cast of characters to really experience that with.
Right.
But the fact was that I have literally told people in confrontations before, you can go ahead and hit me, but I'm going to say shit that your friends are still going to be laughing about long after that black eye is done.
Right.
I'm going to shame you in public, and I'll make you cry.
Right.
And I'm going to still be laughing, and there's nothing you can do about it.
You and I did that show in San Jose a few months ago, and watching you when you're emceeing on stage, when you can go back and forth. There was some gal who, just heckling some shit, whatever, and you and her went back and forth, and you just fucking murdered her. It was wonderful. But sometimes I think, as far as the maliciousness, I think sometimes some audience members, if they're drunk or if they're heckling like serious and they will not shut the fuck up, sometimes maliciousness is called for. Sometimes it's like, bitch, shut the fuck up.
I don't think in that situation it's not malicious at all. I think it's with purpose. Like,
I see.
I will pick and choose. Generally speaking, I will pick and choose what I'm saying to people, because of the fact that with my sense of humor, the intent is never to hurt or harm people. It's to make people laugh. It's to, bring situations to light in a light way, and be light about things that generally are obvious. And there was an example from Paris is Burning when they asked about what is reading, and the one queen says, I don't have to tell you you're ugly because you already know.
Right.
Like, it's very
It's a great. So Paris is Burning. I saw it a few months ago. Documentary from New York in the early '80s, right?
Late 80s.
Late '80s. And
It's available on Netflix, by the way.
It's fucking phenomenal.
It's very educational.
And there was a lot of the kind of not even like the drag community. It was kind of more.
It's based out of the Vogue ball scene. If you're watching Pose on FX, it's a similar type of concept. And in fact, the characters from Pose on FX are based on the characters in large part from that particular.
A lot of that is that Banji idea where maybe like the Ohio Queens, where it was kind of more female and impersonator, or it wasn't as much.
Most of the people in that ball scene quite often identified as trans before there was a word for it. Sure. Before there was a lot of idea behind it. I think that really it's its own thing, but that Paris is Burning is something that's well worth the effort to go look up if you haven't seen it.
It's a great movie. Anyway, continue.
But in terms of my emceeing style and my comedy style, like, I am my number one source of entertainment. Like, I am the number one target of my wit and my condescending behavior and self-deprecation. Right. And as a result, because of the fact that I pull so few punches with myself, I'm not going to very much pull punches with the audience. But at the same time, my intent is not really to harm people. I don't want to like cause them like lasting damage. I don't think they need to go to a therapist after they're done with me. But if you are sitting in a show where I'm there doing a job and you are fucking with me, I'm going to more than fuck with you.
Yeah,
I will shut you down. Right. And even if I should run across somebody who's got an equal wit as me, which I very rarely do in a drag setting. Remember, I've got the microphone, so
you're not going to win.
You're not going to win,
right?
And I will shame you.
And I find that hecklers don't, or anyway, from my experience, they're not necessarily being malicious either. They're more often they're just wanting to be a part of the show. They're just wanting to.
They're just wanting attention. Sometimes, it's fine, but a lot of them just want attention,
Right.
You know,
Or
they're intoxicated.
Yeah, drunk motherfuckers. Ugh. For some reason, when you're drunk, all of a sudden you're the star of the fucking show.
You also think you're wildly funny.
Yeah.
You also think you can dance a lot, and like both are usually wrong.
Right. So the reason why I brought up the reading thing is because I saw that there was some shit you've got in, and I don't know if
I'm constantly getting in shit.
Right.
Like,
but part of that is the idea, like when you're in a comedy setting, in my personal opinion, and you're coming from the context of comedy, I think it's. God damn it, it's comedy. It's no holds barred. It doesn't, you're saying like you're bringing light or you're holding up a mirror. That's not malicious necessarily.
Yeah, so, what I believe is that everybody certainly has their own perspective on comedy. My perspective on comedy is that I think that I find scathing really funny. I find button pushing really funny. I find socially unacceptable really funny.
Absolutely.
And, we talked early on, we kicked off talking about John Waters. There's not a lot that's politically correct about what's going on in those things.
Right.
And there's, I think that I come from the school of comedy with that in mind, or, George Carlin, like people who are like really intensely, Richard Pryor.
Right.
Like people who were wildly talented and yet incredibly not family friendly. And
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Right.
I also, think that so long as you are not like singling out any one group of people, as long as it's across,
spray it everywhere.
as long as it's across the board,
Right.
and nobody is safe, then it makes it everybody is safe to be included. It's
Exactly.
like that's my opinion.
Right.
Unfortunately, San Francisco in specific is not an environment where that's always well embraced.
No. And especially in the drag community or in the gay community, I find that that's fucking tragic because from my experience anyway, and I haven't, I've been a fag hag for a long time, like I love the gay community, and some of the funniest people in the fucking world are that I know are gay. And,
yeah, of course.
And it's doesn't, when I make a joke about a certain race or certain sex or certain this, like it's a fucking joke. And when I shoot to over the top, like you're saying, inappropriate behavior, when I shoot over the top, that's just for the sake of over the top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not because I actually think that's true or
So, I would agree with that. I have a dear friend who's now deceased, and I used to constantly hurt her feelings because I would say things in a joking manner, and she would take them super personally. And I would say, look, I need you to understand that, like, what I'm saying is not, I don't even think it's true. Like, it's not meant to be true.
Right.
It's meant to be a joke.
Right.
And I do stuff about that like that with myself all the time.
Right.
Like, I've done it repeatedly, scatter that throughout this entire thing where I've said really self-deprecating things, which are not even actually true, per se, but they were intended to be a punchline of a joke.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that, I'm not going to leave here feeling like, like, God, boy, you really like talk shit about yourself. You're a bad person. Like, and as a result, like, if I can leave here feeling okay about myself, if I were to read somebody else, like, and they just need to get over it.
Right.
I mean, what we are experiencing, I think, is that we're in an environment of real extremes. So the fact is that there are people who are extremely, extremely conservative, and they have real issues with a lot of things that would negatively impact my life. And then we've got people who are extremely liberal. I don't think that liberal is even the word I would use. They're so radical in their point of view on the opposite end of the spectrum that somebody who's in my position becomes vilified.
Right.
And, one of the things specifically that I think that, and I don't shy away from talking about the fact that I'm constantly finding myself in conflict with people. And there's two things that will either come of that. If I'm in conflict with somebody and I deem myself to be in the wrong, I really quickly, that was fucked up. I shouldn't have said it.
Sure.
And there are other situations where I'm like, you know what? I get where you're coming from, but I'm going to just stand by the fact that it was a one joke, whatever.
Right.
And so, there was an incident that blew up on Facebook from literally like 10 seconds, one basic comment from a little stand-up shtick I did,
Right.
where I made a joke about a pudding pop.
Okay.
About a
Please.
pudding pop, because it was in reference to the Bill Cosby situation,
okay.
which we of course now know he is a convicted rapist.
Yeah, he's a horrible person.
And we know all of this. But the fact was that I made a comment about a pudding pop and said that sometimes I feel like in my sex life I'm so hard up that I want to slip myself a date rape drug and just announce it and be like, oh God, I hope nobody takes advantage of me.
Yeah, that's great.
The fact is, I said that, and there was an individual who posted how misogynistic I am, how anti-women I am,
right.
how all of these things I am. And then because of that individual, a number of other people jumped into that conversation.
Right.
People who, like, one of the things I do acknowledge is because of the level of profile I've had in the city for a long time, many more people know me or feel they know me than I know.
Sure.
And that's just a reality.
Right.
But the fact is that these people jumped in about, oh, you're right. He's like, she's so
They
like,
were waiting in the
anti-women.
wings. They wanted something.
Well, the thing is, it's not that they wanted something about me. That there's a particular mindset of individuals who want something about anything and about anyone.
Right.
And, you know, to those people, I just said, look, you know, first of all, you know, you're making fun of rape culture. You're making fun of you're you're misogynistic. You're anti-women, and I would say if you want to base an assertion about the person I am from a comment about a pudding pop in a clearly joking manner that was directed at myself, I didn't say that he should slip anybody else a fucking pudding pop.
Right. The butt of the joke is you're not getting fucked. That's the butt of the joke.
I didn't say anybody else. I didn't say it was okay to do that to anyone else. I said I was considering doing it to myself just to increase my chances of getting laid.
Right.
And you know, the whole thing blew up to such a degree that personally I was like, this is absurd. These people, by the way, I was not the first person that these individuals in question had complained about. There have been they came to this environment and complained in the past, whatever. So there's like, they have a track record of that, which isn't to like disqualify the possibility that their complaints were founded. But the reality was like, in this situation, it's like, okay, so you don't like me, you don't like my comedy, don't come and see me do comedy or whatever. But at the same time, don't go around and say, you know, draw assumptions about my support for women or various communities, because it not only does this is less about me, but the reality is that we're all like tend to be more or less fighting for the same thing, and when you start to undermine the people who are actually in support of you and villainize them for bullshit that's this minimal, like I'll tell you, my perspective would be like, if that woman needed something that I thought even was a justifiable like situation that I should normally support, I'd be like, you can go fuck yourself. Right. Like, I won't slip you a date rape drug, so you can just go fuck yourself. Right. Like, but
they're not helping the fucking cause.
And I'm not really worried about that in the big picture, but what I will say is that you have to understand that the divisiveness that is being shown is not conducive to the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, and I would, and I don't feel the need to defend two jokes in a comedy act, because of the fact that I feel that any person who is so inclined to make argument with that is going to do so no matter what I say.
Exactly.
And number two, I feel that if my persona is broken down into support or not support, or things that are positive, negative about me, like those two jokes might go in the negative thing, but all of the other actions that I do, which would counteract that, you know, and it makes me uncomfortable like to start listing those off, because then it sounds like I'm trying to defend it. It's like, like, well, you really need to look at the bigger picture here.
Well, there's two different aspects to that. There is, okay, all of the good that I do in the reality, and then all the good that I do in what you perceive of me. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we don't need to stand on that. I don't need to defend myself to an online Twitter fucking troll. You know what I mean? Like, in reality, you know what I mean? I have gay family members. In my reality, so making a gay joke is not the end. I'm allowed to, like, even if you didn't have fucking gay family members, it's a joke is a joke is a joke, you know?
And well, for me, in terms of when it when it comes to comedy,
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I don't even. All I know is I'm really upset because something is getting pounded around here, and it's not me.
Someone's looking for their fucking Pop-Tart.
So that's probably true. That Pop-Tart was just fucking rich. Oh, there. Hold on.
You're the no.
But
You just Pollo just threw the crumbs on the table and then
wiped them off into my
licked
hand, and
it
then
up.
it was that fucking thing was delish. So I get it. Like it's very nuanced. The idea
Exactly.
of picking apart, especially comedy, because comedy is something that is supposed to be outrageous, and if all comedy was family friendly, it wouldn't be very funny most of the time. I mean, there's only so many
Right.
childlike sitcoms that one can whatever.
I like following the logic. So the logic is these people paid money, and even if they got in free, whatever, these people paid to have you, an entertainer. They want to be
They
entertained.
came for a variety of entertainment. I just happen to be one of it.
Right,
So-
but what would be the option? Okay, you make fun of a fucking fence or a fucking you know.
I mean, the option I guess would have been that I just not do or say the kind of things I do and say, and I mean, I will say this, like where I acknowledged that it might have been very off-putting is that this was a show where I was just one of multiple featured artists.
Okay.
So they did not necessarily come with the intent of seeing me.
Right.
My actions, my words, my shtick were offensive to them.
Sure.
Okay, so it's not the same as if I was the headlining act and you know
They came to see you.
Right, like you came to see Lisa Lampanelli and then got upset because Lisa Lampanelli is Lisa Lampanelli.
Right.
You came to see Richard Pryor and got upset because Richard Pryor is Richard Pryor.
But you also weren't on ABC.
But
you know what I mean? Like
the fact was that like if you're going to, you can do whatever you want to do, and like don't support this event if you don't want to support the event. But again, that's being as short-sighted as the rest. In this particular situation, it was just very funny to me because this happened to be a sober event that these people were at. They're like, we're there to support the community and whatever, and see this and whatever the next thing. And then they started in on me, and then the side of me where I want to deflect was like, bitch, you like reeked of fucking like marijuana and alcohol at a sober event. You're talking about respect. How about you? Like, you said I was disrespectful to the women in the audience. What about the fact that you were disrespectful to the entire audience of sober people by being there reeking of drugs and alcohol? Like, what about that? Like, let's not be fucking pointing fingers, bitch, because maybe you need to take it back. Or like, well, we were there because we support this. No, bitch, you were there because one of the people in question is such a fucking horrendous performer that's the only place, like a charity event is the only place you're getting asked to perform. So like you want some truth? I'll serve you some truth. Like, but and then if I have to, I'll also serve you the truth that like this year as Empress of San Francisco, great segue for me to mention my charity work immediately after. Like, well, hold on, right after trash talking some people. So I'll, in the middle of controversy, I'll bring up this other thing that can totally get them in trouble. But as Empress of San Francisco, it was important to me that we seek greater inclusion of people. So
correct.
My Empress, who I personally appointed, is a transgender, non-binary person who is the first of their kind to serve in that role in 50 plus years of the oldest LGBTQ nonprofit organization in the world, of the Imperial Council of San Francisco. So like really like you need to just fucking pick and choose.
Correct.
And honestly, when I'm, like when I look at my character defects, that like quite sometimes the absolute lack of giving a fuck what other people think is a real defect, because when people come to me with those things, I will look at my behavior and be like, yeah, I guess it was a little offensive to you. Oh, go fuck yourself. You
Right.
know, like,
Right.
yeah, I guess it was pretty bad.
Yeah, but there's
but-
a lot of freedom in that too.
But at the same time, like, I think that, again, what makes comedy so special is that there's very, very little that should be, like, shouldn't be touched upon. And that's because of the fact that I think that, you know, life gives you two options. You can either look at things and laugh, or you can look at them and cry.
Right.
And I spent a good deal of my life crying about things, and now, like, you know, I prefer to spend a significant amount of time laughing too.
I also have a lot of hope. When you were talking about that, like, I really do believe most of the people in that audience understood. I mean, did it get a laugh? Number one?
It did.
Exactly. So most people understand the context, and I think most people get it. I think there's a small minority, but they're very yelly and pissy and tantrumy, and they're ruining it. But it does feel. I mean, I know my inclination is to, like, well, fuck it, the world is ending, and it's like, no, not really. Like, there's some really loud, dumb people who just want drama. They smell it in the water and they go after it, and they would find it if it wasn't Pollo Del Mar, it would be somebody else.
That's true, and I think that right now what we're experiencing in a global sense, especially in a political sense, is the fact that the extremes of both sides tend to be the absolute loudest.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones who are the most hateful on the conservative end of the spectrum, you know, I can promise you that there's as many people who would consider themselves a conservative who are cringing at some of that bullshit that's in the rhetoric that's being said.
Right.
They're like, why the fuck are you the loud one? Why
Right.
are you the one that the media is quoting?
Right.
And the same on the other side,
Right.
you know, like there's people far, far, far to the left, I guess, if the opposite is the right, like far to the left, that I'm just like, oh my God,
Insufferable pricks.
You do not speak for me. Like,
Right.
you don't speak for me at all. And in
Right.
fact, like, I can't, you know, I can't even understand where you're coming from on this, because you are just doing too much. And I'm sure that from a kind of a compassionate perspective, I think that both ends of that spectrum probably really, really firmly believe in where they're coming from. They believe in what they're saying. They believe that they're right.
Yeah.
I do think that the unfortunate situation is that when you get that far to the extreme, there is no ability, and this is where I found myself a little bit in that lack of dialogue around those jokes. There's certain people in society that it's a conversation is not possibility,
right.
because of the fact that if you do not inherently toe their party line, if you do not agree with them across the board, then you are racist, or you're sexist, or you're
enemy.
a homophobe, or you're this, or you're that.
Right.
And there's no ability whatsoever to have a compromise, or even the ability to agree to disagree, because if you do not specifically state exactly what they think, then you're a problem.
Right.
And, you know, I think that is, I'm sure that it may serve them really well, but as soon as I identify that someone has that mindset, I
get the fuck out of
I
there.
run. I don't walk. I run to the nearest exit.
Right.
And it's because of the fact that, you know, and it's not because I have the inability to self-censor, or the inability to pick and choose when I say things.
Right.
I will tell you that I say absolutely ridiculously outlandish, intentionally offensive things on a regular basis, because it makes me laugh my fucking ass off. And if, like, people in those situations, it's one of the reasons, for example, that when people who support my drag are like, are you on, like, why haven't you been on Drag Race? Or, like, you know, are you auditioning again for Drag Race? And I've told people, in fact, I told somebody just on Tuesday night, I know myself well enough to know that if I went on Drag Race, I know how I'd be portrayed, because I say ridiculous shit just to get responses.
Correct.
I don't mean it. I say it to get a response. I'm catty and cunty and bitchy and horrible at times, just to be exactly that, with no malicious intent behind it, no ill will, nothing. It's just a joke. It's just a punchline. It's something so outrageous that, like, one of my favorite things is to absolutely cause a jaw to drop. Like, but I have countless people in my life who would attest to the fact that when I've said things in their presence that made them uncomfortable or upset or hurt their feelings, that I was quick to retract it, apologize to them, and be sure that in their presence,
Right.
in their personal presence, I did not say that again. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, if I'm interacting with somebody one-on-one and recognize that what I'm saying is going to be hurtful or offensive or upsetting to a person in a small group or one-on-one situation, if I knowingly do that for no real purpose, I'm a pretty awful person, because you're just knowingly upsetting somebody or whatever.
Right.
If I'm performing for a group of 5,000 people or 50 people or 40 people in a situation where my job is to perform, and I think that 2 of them are going to get offended, but 28 of 30 are going to laugh,
Right.
I'm going for the 28 of 30.
Fuck yeah.
And in certain times when I'm performing, even if I think that 40 out of 100 are going to laugh, and 20 are going to be like a little taken aback, and 2 or 5 are going to be pissed off, I'm still going with that percentage, because like my interest as an entertainer, as a performer, is to get a response.
I went to a show. Some girl had tickets, and I wanted to put my penis inside of her, so I decided to go. I didn't know what the show was, but it's a comedy show. I'm like, okay, cool. So we go to the show, and all of a sudden we're sitting down, and it's at the Swiss American Music Hall or something like that.
Swedish American Musical Hall,
Thank you.
right there, about like on Market Street.
Yes. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I realize, and I didn't know these performers before, but it was this podcast that's super left-leaning and very political, and I get it, whatever. But like, so for an hour, I was sitting there, and I could get some of the jokes I could get behind, but it was just the same message, do, over and over. And here's my experience. I did not agree with with really more the intent. Some of the jokes were really funny, but I didn't agree with like that. Okay, we're going to do an hour of just straight political humor, and everyone in the audience is constantly agreeing and has to believe all of the things that we all believe in this room. And it was really uncomfortable. At the same time, I didn't write a fucking letter. I didn't tweet something like, you guys were really... I sat there and sucked it up. If someone performs something that I disagree with, I don't need to make it about me. I just sat there and sucked it up. Like, it's like, okay, well, this was an uncomfortable experience, and she and I didn't end up going out anyway. But like, I don't feel like if I go to a show and someone says something I disagree with, I now have to judge them as this is all this person is and all this person does, and they're a bad person, they're against me, they're on a different tribe, and now I need to make it a big thing. No, they believe what they believe. I got in fucking for free anyway, and it's a comedy show. Just take it as a fucking comedy show and go home,
Yeah, I would rather... I mean, the most offensive thing to me that one can experience at a comedy show is for... to be there and it to not be funny. And I get that, like, that for those individuals, like that, it was interesting because they didn't mention any of the rest of the set, only those 2 lines. Was the rest of the set not funny or interesting?
Right.
Or was it just those 2 lines? Or perhaps, like, most people would maybe watch the video and see that everybody was laughing, even during those jokes, and be like, whatever. I mean, but that was an isolated incident. Like, really, the bigger picture here is that I have, no qualms particularly owning my own form of comedy. And you guys, it's not like I'm selling out stadiums here. It's like,
well, you said 5,000 a minute. Hey.
Well, I mean, I have done shows in front of 5,000 people before.
Sure. Do you do Pride ever?
I did. For a number of years, I produced California's Great America Pride Night, the gay day at Great America.
Okay.
And so I would always host that main stage, and there'd be like 5,000 people there or whatever. And and I've done... I've never done our Pride, but I've done every other city basically in the region.
San Jose, Sacramento, all that.
All of it. Luxurious San Mateo and Modesto.
Ooh.
Yes.
Ooh la la.
So, but the fact is that I also think that one of the keys is kind of knowing your audience too. Like I would, and when it comes to people being sensitive, unfortunately, I think that the most sensitive people tend to fall somewhere in the spectrum of the queer community too. So it's like the people who have got the bawdiest and raunchiest senses of humor are in the queer community, and people who are the like most sensitive and the most, this is my word of choice, problematic, are in the queer community too. Because and on some levels, I do appreciate those people who think they're the thought police, because, you know, they, by being so extreme, they can bitch and moan and about whatever it is that is even too ridiculous for me to get behind, and then it may move us somewhere where, like, okay, well, I'm not willing to go quite that far, but this will be a acceptable range of commentary or behavior.
But I think a piece of it, though, might be not as good. And I was talking about this with someone else. Like, I understand the pendulum. You know what I mean? I get it. You know, like, it was, you know. But at the same time, I think, like you were saying earlier, the people all the way on the very, very far right see only the people on the very far left and react to it shitty. The people on the left, very far left, see only the loud cunts on the right and they react shitty. Like, it's I don't know if it's helping us as much. I mean, I get the pendulum and it makes sense, but, you know, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Well, I mean, the reality of what we're talking about is just human nature, because you don't go on Yelp to review like a restaurant and say it was pleasant enough.
Yep. Yeah.
Like,
you're right.
You go
you're
on
right.
and you say I love it or I hate it.
Fucking hate it. Right. It's
Like,
either 1 star or a 4 or 5.
It's like nobody goes on and is like, yeah, it's acceptable. Like, you know, and that is what you know, why I would much rather, specifically about doing comedy. And I'm like, you know, hopefully in the next year or so, there'll be more opportunities for people to see me doing that, because I want to sit down and write a show that would be a 1-hour comedy special for myself.
Nice.
But, you know, I would rather people have some kind of a strong emotional response to it, either thinking it was really, really funny, or even if they're like saying really horrible shit, I'd be like, I don't care. At least like, you know, I've never wanted to be that person that in a room full of people you don't remember was there.
Correct. You don't want to be lukewarm.
I don't, you know, I do not want to be that person who does not stand out in a crowd. I've always stood out in a crowd, and you know, given my childhood of moving around a lot and, you know, having the experiences that I had as a kid, I learned that there were 2 ways to live. Either you were the class clown, and you stood out, or the alternative of that was that you were the wallflower and you blend in and are forgotten. And like, those were the 2 modes that I went into, and I chose a long time ago that I never want to be the person who's easily forgotten. Like, oh, we were hanging out the other night with
who was
like,
that bitch?
You know, like no, and that actually plays into the way I think about my drag as a performance art too, because I tell people that lots of people have seen me on stage, or they've seen me lip sync, or they've seen me do this, that, or the other. But my favorite kind of performance art, my favorite performance, is the interaction one-on-one with people, so that they have the Pollo Del Mar experience, is what I call it. Like, you know, they experience me so they feel connected to me as a person. And, you know, which is why when you have that mindset, what I do on stage sometimes isn't half as important in my mind as the shit that I do off stage.
Right.
Because what I say on stage is for one thing, but the way I treat people, the way I interact with people, the way I make people feel on a one-on-one level is a completely different experience.
When people are trying to take pictures with you, when people are like, talking to you, it's all around them. Right.
It's a very different type of thing. And so, and you know, what I believe is the same way that you can be like, oh, you know, grandma still calls people Oriental. Like, you know, you're like, well, that's not cool, but, you know, grandma's also wonderful, and grandma's really sweet, and even if she thinks you're Oriental, she still, like, treats you nice, you know, like...
And that's I think maybe that a piece of that comes from the fact that you have not lived in San Francisco your whole life. I went to Oklahoma last year, and there were gay people, there were black people and white people, and that was fine. It wasn't, you know, I feel like San Francisco especially, or San Francisco, New York, mostly San Francisco, we just think that everyone in between San Francisco and New York is just fucking lynching and hates gays. And like, most people, when you get them alone, are fucking kind of okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that is the reality. I think that the frustration becomes, for a person in my political situation, like, or my political mindset, is that I'm aware of that. Like, I'm aware that people who have completely different points of view politically or whatever, can be really super nice and really friendly and all this stuff. And the part that is troubling is like, well, I do know that you're a good person. I know that you're a kind person. I know that you're generous and all these things, but you're still somehow managing to take political action that is negatively affecting people that I know that you care about and that you like and that you do support in your own way. But in this one fundamental way, you're doing things that would take away rights from me or discriminate against me. So I think that is slightly problematic. You know, it's the same thing. I don't, but I guess that probably comes from the fact that I don't across the board put people in like these like sweeping categorizations, like
Correct.
You're a Republican. How could
Right.
you? I mean, yes, there's some of that. Like, how could you not be appalled by things that are apparently acceptable in your party right now? When, but at the same time, like I also
Exactly. Same thing goes for the fucking left.
Right. At the same time, like I was rather openly not very supportive of a recent candidate who ran for a position here in San Francisco for a Senate seat here in the California area, because there people were like, well, he's gay, and I was like, I don't fucking care. I think he's a dick. I don't really I'm not that interested in like
or just because you have a D by your name or an R by your name doesn't mean you automatically earn my vote.
I mean, if it comes down to like that's all I know about you, and you are running against something that I'm suspecting will be like
not good
like,
for
not
what
good
you believe,
for
then
the,
yeah, all right.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but at the same time, like it doesn't, you know.
But I'm allowed to say that I'm making a decision, not obviously allowed, First Amendment, whatever, but like I'm allowed to say lesser of two evils, okay. But that doesn't, just because you're the lesser of two evils doesn't mean that you're a fucking sacred saint that I should never criticize or talk shit,
not at all. I was recently having a Twitter exchange with one of my followers. By the way, you can follow me at TheGlamazonPDM, at TheGlamazonPDM on Twitter. But I was having an exchange with one of my followers on Twitter recently about, who retweeted this thing that said it said something to the effect of a Green Party vote doesn't belong to the Democratic Party unless you basically win that vote over. You're like, whatever.
Okay.
And so it was what it was saying. It was supporting Green Party candidate or supporters not voting for Hillary Clinton. That's specifically what it was about.
Okay.
In the last election for president. And my response to that was, yeah, I completely agree with you that like on the road up to this like final showdown or whatever, the fact of the matter is you can vote for who you want and support who you want, and ultimately you really can. But
sure,
in my opinion, when it comes down to like A or B,
right?
Like when right now, unfortunately, our system is set up so that we get option A or B,
right?
And when you choose C and D, and you know that it's going to like ultimately your failure to support the lesser of the two evils is going to inherently then support the person who is the greater of the two evils.
Sure.
You're at a minimum, you reduce any opportunity you have later on to bitch about anything. Well, it's like, well, you wanted to fucking support what you wanted to support. Fantastic. Good for you. You've done that. Mm-hmm. Now shut your fucking mouth because
you've proven your point.
like, yeah. It's like, okay, so, you threw away your option to impact, and the way I looked at it, I was explaining to this person, he of course kept tagging some random group of like, I don't even know, Green Party Democrats, like, because I was like, Jesus Christ, are you trying to win support from them? Are you trying to win favor?
Right.
But it was just a really interesting incident where it was like, well, yeah, like I get what you're saying. You would prefer this other situation. There's a lot of things I would prefer as well, but we're not there yet. And in either you really build up the kind of support you need to be in that place, or maybe just go with the lesser of two evils.
Do you feel like, because I maybe this is because I was not as plugged in, not that I'm plugged in now, but like you said, the kind of vagaries of both sides where like or not vagaries, but like you have huge, vulgar, fun personalities in the gay community, and then you also have the very sensitive. Do you feel like the sensitive was always there?
I think that the sensitive has always been there. I think that what I will say is that I think that the sensitive has evolved, because so what I feel that a lot of people, we've always seen people who are socially minded activists in the queer community. And so, but I think that as certain things have progressed, like when, as the community progresses and as rights for the community advance, the things that people become extreme about become more extreme, because some of the things that were the extreme 20 years ago are now considered standard.
Correct.
So therefore those people have moved on to like farther and farther and farther things. And I think that some things that are specifically becoming hot button for people to really take issue with are things like discussion of gender identities and the extremes that some individuals will have in defining for themselves their gender. Like, you know, I think that, for example, if you want to call yourself or identify as something I've never actually ever heard of, and you've created your own pronoun and you've created your own gender identity in some realm of that nature, I'm all for it. I'm like, do whatever you want. It is your life. You should live it. You should, you know, feel what's comfortable. But with that, at the same time, is like, if I make up some term, identity, something for myself, it becomes either I have to like know that I'm facing a battle, that I have to educate every single person I encounter on that, and knowing that that's going to potentially create conflicts, because the response of a lot of people, if I tell them that my gender is a series of letters, and I've seen this like like XYR or something, I can't even recall exactly what it was. That's what the person said their gender identity was. I'm going to be like, my first response is naturally going to be like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, I you know, so my point being that I fully support the individual's right to live and identify and be as they want. But I'm also realistic enough to understand that when the world tends to be rather binary around gender, and we're trying to open the world to the idea of the possibility that you can be gender neutral or that you can be gender non-binary, meaning that you don't necessarily fully identify as one or the other. When you're giving me option Z on a list of A, B, C, like you're setting yourself up for conflict.
I think there
and
are,
and that's something that even people who are extremely open-minded are going to be like, do what you want to do, girl, but don't expect me to fucking you know, sing your song about
and
this.
honestly, I've known people, and I've been that guy before, who are actively trying to be contrary and actively kind of stir some shit and get attention.
Absolutely.
And I don't think, and because I, you know, and in the public eye, it seems like it's almost like we all have to like think that I could be, you know, again, but it's like, it's on the social media anyway. It's like all gay people, all LGBTQ, blah blah blah, are all, you know, just good, you know, I don't believe they're good natured, but like, you can be a cunt even though you're gay. You can be a cunt even though you're black. You can be a cunt even though you're, you know, somewhere in the middle of gender. Like, anybody, all humans can be cunts, and I don't think I have to like get the marching song just because of your identity. I have to just 100% like, there are people who want to punish.
Yeah, I think that there are people who are their desire is to find conflict. There's people who live in that place of conflict. There's people who live in that place of you know, there no matter, unfortunately, no matter what you're doing, where you're at, how you present, what you believe, what you support, there are people who will take issue with that. And I think that I most of the time have steered clear of that, and the communities that are more rife with that, I also steer clear of that. I'm also not particularly invited into those places.
Yeah, because they know what you do.
Because I think that one of the things that people I've always been told about myself, and there's two ways of presenting two sides of the same coin. Some people are like, just say, oh, you're a bitch, because that's like, and there's other people that say like, you're very blunt, you're like no bullshit, you're no nonsense, and you call things the way you see them, and and those are two sides of the same coin, because one is listing out the attributes that other people, when you don't like confrontation, when you expect somebody to tell your party line, when you whatever, then you're like, if somebody doesn't, then, oh, she's a bitch, she's like whatever.
Right.
And then other people who value like honesty or upfrontness or bluntness, and would say it in those terms. But I think that since I have a reputation for being either blunt and straightforward and authentic, or a bitch,
right.
Either one, same thing. I think that people who are participating in situations where like people call shenanigans on a regular basis, they're
right.
not going to really be embracing me, because I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me?
But how do you have fun in that? I mean, how do you fucking have fun? I feel like there's been some times where I go to a show, whether it be a burlesque show or I'm not trying to say it's not valid, but sometimes a drag king show, where it's just like we're all kind of talking ourselves into, and sometimes it's for support for the artist or support for the person who's, and fucking more power to him. But sometimes I'm like sitting in a room like, okay, we're all talking ourselves into having fun right now.
Oh, well.
How long can you do that? You know what I mean?
I
love offensive shit. That's my fun,
I think that, to be honest, like, when you get to certain situations and everything has to be so sterilized, it does kill the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's because of the fact that there are certain environments that I found myself in where sterile is the most easily, like, it's the first word that comes to mind, because you think of like a doctor's office where everything has been like sterilized and it has to be like, whatever, and nobody, it's not even socially acceptable to like laugh in a doctor's office, kind of type of situation. So I've been in actual dressing rooms where it felt that way too, where like everybody's like, so like, there's certain groups of people who are like watching what they're saying because they don't want to offend other people, and there's certain groups of people who are just sitting there waiting, and you can see them like with their nail file, like, I'm gonna get this bitch.
Right.
And it's just, for me, it's not fun. If there are people who find that fun and enjoyable, and I do believe that there are certain groups of people who kind of like thrive in that environment, but I think that, again, this is just my perception. I think that there are people who are sort of like inherently of that mindset. They gather together in groups of people who have that exactly same mindset, because it becomes a hive mind. Like,
right.
if you don't support this and this and this, then you're the enemy.
Right.
So they get together in their groups of people, and
they all have the same haircut.
and I swear to God, I really think that their idea of fun is pointing out how awful other people are.
Yeah.
Like, their ideas, did you see, oh my God, they were so misogynistic. Oh, they were so misogynistic.
Right.
Did you see that they're also transphobic? Oh, yes, they're extremely transphobic. Did you, and they're like, I think that idea of, like, because to me, for example, because I don't like shy away from conflict, but conflict and the drama associated with that isn't my idea of fun anymore.
Sure.
So my idea of fun comes out in other ways. But I think that there are certain people, because of the fact that they're not allowed to have fun at anything, nothing's supposed to be like funny or this or that, their idea
That's
of
where the
what the
fun goes.
entertainment is from the adrenaline rush of being angry.
It does have adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Anger definitely brings with it an adrenaline rush. So I think that, like, getting together in groups and like riling each other up, like, is their fun.
Right.
This
may kick it up in the whole thing, but like, I don't find a lot of masculine dudes who do that, or like, I feel like mostly there's this weird, the energy, and maybe that's just because they feel more victimized, rightly so, or whatever. But I feel like it's mostly either females or people with vaginas, or people who identify more feminine. I could be wrong, but I feel like it's not a lot of dudes, and they have their own shittiness. Don't get me wrong.
Who
are actively looking to be offended?
I don't necessarily know that's true. Like, maybe in the queer community, but I think that there's a lot of like really masculine people who get offended about race relations. I think there's a lot.
Touche.
Like, I think there's a lot of really masculine people who get offended by by politics. I think that there's a lot of things that can really set people off. I don't think that masculinity or femininity or male or female lines necessarily dictate that.
Touche.
I will say that I think that in the queer community, there's probably there's some distinctions between people's experiences, and I think that possibly because of the fact that people, if they're more effeminate as men, they've gone through like a different level and a different kind of victimization throughout the course of their life, so that it probably inspires in them an inherently different response to things. So if I had grown up like being considered masculine or perceived as masculine, a lot of the interactions and negative experiences that I had in my life would have been eliminated, because I was considered and viewed as effeminate, and I was considered to be sissy and all of those things. So it, as a result of that, it made me hyper aware of those experiences, because if I had been able to just blend in or been not, whether blending in maybe not being the right word, but if I had not stood out, I would not have become the target of so many things, and therefore I would not have had the firsthand experience with them, and therefore I would not have the kind of level of empathy that I have in situations where I see other people experiencing that. So that does lend itself to me being more prone to say, you know what, sissy shaming or femininity shaming people is not okay, even though I do it all the time.
Right.
Because I've had those experiences, I think that in terms of in the queer world, the LGBTQ world, to me, when it comes to men and masculinity becomes the passing point. And so therefore, if you can pass as not gay, based on your masculinity, your experience is going to be extremely different.
I agree. That is a good point. I think for me, though, like as an example, I don't find, and I'm sure there are people who grew up who weren't bullied, but so I wasn't effeminate, but I was also a chunky kid, and so I was for sure bullied as well. But I feel like, not that we shouldn't be aware and talk about and correct the things that need to be correcting. But I feel like, we all kind of go through some version of horrible shit. You know what I mean? We all, I guess from what I see, and I could be wrong, I just find that language-wise, it's mostly a couple of different groups, but it used to be the language police used to be back in the 80s and 90s were the ultra-right Christians who were more the language police. When it came to Cop Killer, the song by Ice-T, or when it came to the PMRC with Frank Zappa in the 80s, when it came to these different groups, it was much more on the right. People were like, no, you're not allowed to, and now it's almost swung the other way where it's like, no, you're not allowed to, is coming more from the left.
I think that I don't know. I think that what it comes down to is that for the left, the people tend to be policing, and I don't like thought police. I don't like vocabulary police, but I think that people on the left tend to be policing the terminology that is or is not acceptable to when addressing the community.
Okay.
And so they are saying you can no longer say that about us, and that for the community sometimes it's really helpful. Other times I'm I don't give a fuck. I like what you say.
Well,
it's fine.
Tranny is a great example of that.
That is a word that is definitely not has taken on a sense of not being acceptable even within the queer community,
right. And
it's a term that was and has been used for years and years, and it I think that what we see as language evolves is that people become sensitive to things, and I believe that when it comes to my terminology and my language, it can be dependent on my experience and the people that I know and that I have in my life. And if other people are offended by it, I'm probably not talking to that person. But
true.
When I, when I'm talking to my friends, if it's okay among the group that's addressing, it's okay.
Right.
There are other times when the problem really becomes not the people within a community talking. It becomes the way that people outside of the community will take that and adopt that language and use it. The word tranny specifically, I don't think it was particularly problematic when used by the queer community because of the fact that we had a little bit of a different interaction and experience with that community of individuals. But it's when people outside of it, when RuPaul's Drag Race became so successful, and all of a sudden she's using that terminology, and now like random people think that it's okay to call people trannies or this or that. It's not, because, you know, one of the things that I think becomes classic for interactions between people is the level of interaction that you have and the level of familiarity you have with a person.
Sure.
My drag daughter Sandra, oh no, she didn't, will recall a classic situation where a trans woman that she knew, as it turns out, like, not that it matters in this situation, but a woman she knew was being really, really drunkenly belligerent towards me. And I was trying to be really pleasant, and she just kept getting worse and worse. And at one point she said something, it was about Jell-O shots nonetheless. And she was like, "I want a Jell-O shot right now, you bitch." And I snapped on her and I said, "You don't fucking know me like that."
Right.
Like, if one of my friends, somebody I knew, had said that same exact words to me, it wouldn't have made a bit of difference. But I barely know you, and I ain't your bitch.
Right. And I wanna, especially as far as, because I think the identity of who she was is not what made that word taboo to you or offensive to you.
No,
it was the context.
I was actually saying, like, not that it matters that she was transgender or whatever, but it was just that transition from one story to relate to the other. But the fact was that I think that, again, like, contextually speaking, I have friends all the time who say, like, who are trans, and they say tranny to each other,
right?
And it doesn't mean anything to any of them because they're in that,
right?
But that community has separated that language and taken it only for themselves. Even people in the queer community are not allowed to use it anymore, or do so acceptably. And part of me is like, whatever. I don't care. It's not a word that I find necessary.
Sure.
But at the same time, like, I do understand that the problem becomes, like, things that could be said contextually between people that are not problematic when taken out of context, A, or B, when co-opted by people outside of a community,
right?
Then it becomes problematic.
But I feel like those people would use it as a pejorative whether they were allowed to, quote unquote, use the word or not. You know what I mean? I feel like, so as an example, I'm not in the community, but I feel like it's okay for me to say tranny because I love trannies. You know what I mean? Like, I support the, you know what I mean? So it's like, is it a pejorative in a negative way? And I get it. I get it that a lot of people who aren't in just don't understand the context, and so they're looking for anything. Oh, good, I get to say that now, or I get to say this, or I get, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, I think with that particular word, it was bordering on becoming a catchphrase. You know, like,
sure.
It started with Christian Siriano from Project Runway, like, "Hey, tranny," whatever, like, and then it just became a thing. But what I would say, you know, not to be the thought police or the vocabulary police, but I would counter that by saying, like, okay, if you support the trans community, if you appreciate and admire them and have friends within it,
sure.
Like, if this, like, the collective mindset is like, we don't really want that terminology used in reference to us, like, if you're genuinely supportive of them, like, maybe like, oh, just drop it. Like, you know,
for me, I think it more goes to that idea that you said a second ago, where, like, it's not an important word for you to use. Like, I only really use it when I'm talking about, you know, either tranny shack or, you know, when we discuss the word itself,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So it's not super important to me, but, you know, I also, if I'm making a joke, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Or if I'm trying to be funnily offensive on purpose, you know, or whatever, I don't want to curtail, you know, I don't want to, especially if it's not a group conscience of the entire community. It's a small conscious that are going to be offended by fucking anything anyway. Yeah. Bullies are not satisfied. You know what I mean?
I mean, I will say that I think that the number of individuals that I know who are personally that, like, and I know a number of people in the trans community, the number of people that I know who are offended by use of that particular word by people that they consider friends is really small. And I think that and this is a subject that I really don't want to step on because I managed to avoid it for 2 years of co-hosting a podcast with a transgender co-host.
We don't need to.
No. I mean, it's just I also think that the shift with the trans community from wanting to, for example, it used to say like, I know a woman or I know a trans woman,
Right.
and now like all women have to like get some kind of identifier. It's like, is she cis or is she trans? Well, she's a woman. Like, I know, but is she cis or is she trans? It's like, well, I don't think the majority should have to get a qualifier to appease the minority, but that's just on me. Right. So, but I think that there are situations where it's moving farther and farther that way. We once used to ask for as few labels as possible, and now everybody wants, like, I'm expecting to meet a guy on Grindr or Scruffed who now has so many labels attached to his name, it's going to look like the scientific genre of what, you know, it's like the subspecies of this with the side over of that. It's like, you know, I don't want that for myself. Like, I think that...
Well, there's currency
I'm
in
just
being...
gay.
Right. There's
gay,
currency
it's
in
fine.
being ultra victim right now anyway. You know what I mean?
I've heard that a lot from people.
You know, but I think when you get somebody alone, whether they're trans or black or white or whatever, gay, straight, like most people are all right. You know what I mean? And,
absolutely.
And my persona online versus my persona in real life, often that's not, you know, it's not the same. You know what I mean? So I have to extend that same, you know.
Yeah, I think that for me, what I will say is I'm open-minded enough to listen to people's arguments for things.
Right.
But I'm certainly not of the hive mindset that's going to make me immediately adopt other people's causes as my own.
Right.
Because quite unfortunately, what we experience in the situation of like this breakdown of minorities is people consistently have been told like, okay, I'm an advocate for XYZ. And then people who are in that category will say, well, you are an advocate for me or you're an ally, but you're not actually, you're not part of this fight. So we get to be the voice. You get to sort of be like the manpower. Right. You get to listen and you get to support. Right. Well, my perspective is like, that's awesome. But if this isn't my dog, if I don't have a dog in this fight, then enjoy. Right. Like, or if I'm not allowed to express a differing perspective or opinion because it's not for me to decide that, then cool, that's fine. But this is your fight, not mine, and I'm going to sit it out. And so the thought experience here is that the more people begin to want to find these situations that need greater and greater support for people to push forward, like I've been so disenfranchised, like I'm sorry, you removed me from this equation like 8 levels ago because I'm cis, Caucasian, male. Like,
and I was an ally until I make a joke, and all of a sudden I'm an enemy.
Like, yeah, I'm cis, white male, in my 40s, was not economically entirely disadvantaged youth, like this, that, like, sorry, you've removed me from this fight so much that you are completely on your own, and therefore I just disassociate with it. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I've been told so many times that I'm not part of this battle that. You're right. Yeah. I acknowledge it. And this is your battle. So I got mine. So, and you know, and the flip side of that is it'll be like, that's because you come from a place of privilege. Ugh. That's because you come from, you know, and it's like, okay, right. I do have some privilege and I was willing to lend it to you until like you like told me how much my identity based on who I am was offensive to you. And therefore it's like, so no, I'm not like,
and in this day of nuance. So I'm half Puerto Rican and 3/16 I think black, and I was talking about this with somebody else. It's like, okay, so then like as an example on the race side, you know, some people, not all, but some people say, well, if you're not of this race, then you can't even speak to any, or you can't even. Like, you come on, white people, sit down and shut the fuck up. It's like, okay, well, I'm 40% white. Does that mean I should sit down 40% of the time? Am I allowed to have 40% of the opinion? Am I allowed to say, you know what I mean? Where, like, if we extrapolate that logic, it's like, hang on, let's just sit down and talk. Let's just fucking have a conversation.
Right. Well, I do believe fully that it's not necessarily my place to speak to life experiences I haven't had.
Sure.
And I certainly will not use my lack of experience in certain life situations to undermine or negate the idea or concept that other people do have those experiences.
Their own experience, right.
At the same time, I think that one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that, you know, if I am told constantly, because I am, I guess, considered the majority in the United States, cis, white, male. I also happen to be gay and a drag queen, which puts me somewhere in like on another area. But like,
right, it's complicated.
The overall elements of who I am would be considered like problematic, and I'm like, well, again, if I'm told that I am the problem, like, right. and the interesting thing is that quite often you'll see minority groups or extreme minority groups, like by that I mean like minority within the minority within the minority.
Right.
They'll say like, well, your role is to acknowledge that you are this,
right,
and this,
right.
and then help make a difference. And really, quite often, it feels like an unwinnable situation.
Correct.
Because once again, you are not allowed to express like a disagreement or like a lack of support across the board for things, because then you're just reverting back into your privilege,
or even a disagreement, or even a disagreement on the approach. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm all for you, but do we need to say it that way? Because it also looped. No, you're not even like. I just, bottom line, I don't want to feel like shit about myself. I don't need any fucking help. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to feel like because I'm X or because I got a dick or because that all of a sudden I should feel bad. You know what I mean? I feel like we're all doing the best we can with what we got, and it's not that big a fucking deal.
Well, I don't think we all are, but I think most of us are.
I feel like even the people who are doing shitty, they have their experience and they're acting out like cunts right now, but like, you know, we're all doing the best we can.
I think that most people are doing, if I'm to be honest, I think that most people are doing the least that they can get away with what they've got.
Right. No,
I think that they're doing as little as possible with what they've got. But I mean, and by that I mean that like most people are just skating through, and I'm not talking about just socially. I'm talking about like 85% of the people at work are like playing fucking Sudoku,
right,
when the boss isn't looking,
or listening to this.
But they're hard at work on that spreadsheet as soon as like they hear footsteps in the hallway,
right.
or when it comes to social justice issues, that people are doing the bare minimum that they can there to get by. And then, you know, so in some ways, God bless the people who are really, really extreme, because at least they're doing something. And I think that for those people who are extreme on either end of the spectrum, there's a great deal of passion behind what it is. I don't have to agree with it to admire that passion. It's a passion that I don't always have, and that I often find myself in direct conflict with. But I appreciate that they're fired up. Most of the time, like, you know, I just enjoy the opportunity to see how fiery they are from a distance, and then fucking jet the opposite way.
Right. Well, this has been fucking great.
Well,
I'm really happy to
me
have
on.
you on. This has been a great conversation. I feel like we could have a million longer, but I gotta piss again. And
I gotta piss too, and I'm almost certain there is not another Pop-Tart in that bathroom. I'm so mad.
Well, why don't you give once in a while? God damn it! Bring a half a Pop-Tart back to the bathroom.
It
Whatever
was
weird.
It was 1 3/4 of a Pop-Tart. Really, it was delicious.
Hang on though. Did you eat the 3/4?
Yeah, fucking yeah. Of course.
What
I
if they touched it with their bathroom hands?
I don't fucking care. Like, I've sucked strangers' dicks. I don't know. Like, I mean, every now and then I'll like lick an asshole. I don't really. Like...
I love, dude. I mean, I've never licked a guy's asshole, but like, I love eating ass, dude. I fucking adore that shit. I'm a fucking.
Wait, guys do that to women?
Oh yeah.
That woman's a whore.
She is.
What kind of respectable woman lets a guy eat her ass? Jesus.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Conservatish. And do you have anything to promote besides? I think. Well,
if you get a chance, depending on when you hear this, come out and see me at El Toro Nightclub, 2470 San Bruno Avenue in the Portland neighborhood of San Francisco on Thursday, September 6th, it is going to be a huge pro wrestling event there. Wrestling for Charity returns. That's going to be super fun. And then I believe on August 18th, which is a week from the Saturday, I'm going to be doing Drag Bingo at that same location for charity. Follow me on Facebook at Pollo Del Mar Fans, POLLODELMARFANS. You can find me on Instagram under the same, and the Glamazon PDM on Twitter. That's the easiest way to keep up to date with all my schedule.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, boys and girls. And everybody in the middle.